Welcome to Raging Bullets, a DC Comics fan podcast, episode 346, The Raging Oscars, Part 1. Welcome to Raging Bullets. I'm Sean Whalen, drnorge, and I'm joined as always by my co-host Jim, the sensei of the whatnot Segulin, and the Duke of You Know.
How's it going, eh?
Jim, on this episode, we're going to be kicking off the first of a two-part major undertaking, the Raging Oscars. This is actually the start of our 7-year anniversary episode. The end of March every year is the anniversary of when we first started podcasting, and this is our first of our two-part major undertaking of looking at the entire line in a line-by-line fashion, where we take a look at each of the book groupings that are going on in the New 52, give our kind of top 5 list of things that have been going on, share any wishes that we have for the line, any disappointments that we have for the line. So it's a great casual, all-encompassing discussion, and it's a good time to do that because there's been so much that's happened since the New 52 kicked off. So that'll be this episode. We are proud members of the Comics Podcast Network and the League of Comic Book Podcasts. Sponsoring us this episode is DCBService.com and InStockTrades.com. This is my favorite time of the month. At the end of the month, this is when DCB Service is getting ready to shift over to show us all of the amazing deals that they're offering. And one of the cool things about pre-ordering through DCBService.com is, you know, with all the relists and resolicitations, sometimes there's things like last month, I ordered for a friend as a gift, The Absolute of New Frontier, because I got to do a birthday gift and that type of thing. And one of the great things about doing it that way is, I get that 50% off deal. So now all of a sudden something that normally would be too expensive to do as a gift for someone kind of fits more into my range and category. So DCBService.com is a great way to do pre-orders of current material, of resolicited material. They're always offering deals of things at 50 to 75% off on top of their already amazing discounts of 35 to 40% off of current books and things. So DCB Service really is your pre-order source. You want to go check them out. Remember, they're also a digital partner with Comixology and iVerse Media. If you link your accounts, 5% of all those purchases goes towards your order. So make sure you're doing your digital purchasing through there. It's a great way to support our show sponsor. It doesn't cost you any more money. So please consider doing that. Go to our website. Feel free to click on the links and go straight over there. So I've got banners back up on our website. It was something that I had to re-put a plug-in back on our site, but there's banners right on our site that are handy-dandy to get right there. It's also always in the show notes and things too, so make sure to support our sponsors at DCBService.com. Over at InStockTrades.com, I wanted to shout this out. Seeing as this is an episode about books that we really love and trends that we've really enjoyed, American Vampire hardcover volume 5. I don't know if you're reading this book as much as I am, Jim. I love this. This collects issues 28 to 34 of the monthly series, plus the 5-issue miniseries American Vampire Lord of Nightmares. It's 272 pages. If you're enjoying Scott Snyder's Batman, you should be reading this book. It's $29.99 regularly, 50% off. It's only $14.99 for a 300-page, close to 300-page hardcover. What an amazing way to be jumping in on board American Vampire if you're not reading this. It's a great series. This one takes place during the 50s. It reads like a TV series. It reads like some of the best television drama. Like I'm watching television, I should say, like The Following and stuff like that, which have these long-term story arcs from the season. And American Vampire kind of fits into that category of real edgy television. And if you're not reading this book, I cannot recommend it highly enough. I picked this one out for an ad specifically because I'm digging it so much. So that's from InStockTrades.com. Remember, any of your trades or hardcover purchases, if you stockpile them all together and do stockpiling and do a $50 order, you get free shipping. So it's a great way to just bundle things together and save even more money off of their discounts, which are usually 40 to 50% off of trades and hardcovers. So it's a great way to collect those at a discount and save even more money. So I want to thank them for sponsoring the show. Jim, I want to shout out real quick. Next weekend is the Comic Geek Speak Super Show. It's cgssupershow.com. I'm going to be heading there. I'm going to be there all day Saturday. I'm arriving Friday night, and I'm going to be there all day Saturday. I'm going to hang out Saturday evening. I'm leaving Sunday. So it's April 6th and 7th. This is a show that is near and dear to my heart. It spawned out of smaller CGS fan gatherings and turned into a full-blown convention. And I'm really excited to be attending this one. The guest list is amazing. So I encourage you to go to their site. If you're going there and you would like to hook up, please contact me at ragingbullets@gmail.com or on our Facebook page or something and let me know you're going to be there. I'd love to hang out with people. I'm a big fan of, this kind of convention for me is one where I just like to go as a fan and just kind of hang out and really just enjoy myself. They always have Saturday evening gatherings. I don't think I'm going to make anything on Friday night because I'm going to be arriving late. I'm working Friday, and then I'm going to leave right from work and head out there. So it's more than likely I'm going to be hooking up with everybody on Saturday. But if you're going to be around Saturday night or at the con on Saturday, I would love to meet and chat with you and talk and do whatever. So if there's anybody that's a friend of the show that wants to hang out, I'm going to be there, and I'd love to talk to you. So please let me know if you're going to be there. James, what kind of a podcast are we?
Raging Bullets is a spoiler podcast. During our Raging Oscars, we will be going in-depth into the plotline, story twists, and whatnot for most, if not all, of the comics in the DC universe. So, please be wary and be warned, because, well, we actually want everyone to make sure you enjoy the show.
Did you call it Oscars?
I probably did. I meant to say Oscars.
You know what? It's funny how tongue-tied I've been, like, trying to do this opening, so I shouldn't really be giving you a hard time about it because you were hitting a home run there. Anyway, let's talk some comics.
Carter Hall, scientific genius from a far-off world, flies into action as Hawkman.
Jim, it was funny. We were talking before we started recording about just how we went about this. We do the Raging Oscars a little bit different every time we do it, and it winds up being one of those episodes that it's a very daunting episode for us to put together because I love them, but it always involves a lot of rereading. I've got 10 pages of notes for this show alone, and when I say pages of notes, I don't mean like small little, I've got paragraphs and paragraphs and paragraphs on 10 pages because I really wanted this to be all-encompassing. What we did was, and you put together the categories on this, and I think they were great, we went line by line on the New 52 and kind of broke everything down. There were 2 lines that you did that I combined because I did something that you didn't do on yours that I know you don't normally read as much of as I do. So when we get to that, it's at the end, and you'll kind of understand why I did that separately. It makes sense at the time. But I really appreciate you putting together the categories for this. I actually want to make one announcement beforehand. I just saw this week, and it's really cool to me. I love these digital firsts that DC's doing. They're doing a digital, I think it looks like digital exclusive, Batman 66 comic book, which I think is really cool. So it's another one of these. I'm liking them as a supplement and a complementary to my current reading of regular full weekly titles, or monthly titles, I should say. So I just like the different delivery method of the digitals, and I'm kind of excited to see what a Batman 66 book will look like, because it'll be out of continuity, obviously. Adam West isn't running around, but I always like that about DC, and in comics in general, where you can kind of take a step back to like a different era. And so I'm really curious to see how they're going to bring that about, because I don't think there's ever been a Batman 66 comic book before. So I think that's kind of neat.
Man, that does sound kind of a cool concept. And it's funny, I'm also doing some changing on my end. I'm shifting more towards the digital stuff. And I think I'm going to get a couple more of the titles in digital. And I'm actually dropping some titles. And it's funny, I'm not dropping due to quality or anything like that. I'm literally dropping because I have way too many titles, and I'm bogged down, and I'm enjoying what I'm reading, but I'm finding that, one, financially, it's a little bit drawing to get every single title the DC universe does, but also time-wise, I still have a stack of comics that I have to read that that I haven't gotten to, and it's I'll jump on the titles that I know we're gonna be talking about next, but I've got a pretty good sized back catalog going on, and I'm like I need to make some changes. So it's one of the things I've been doing is I've been looking at titles that I'm going to get rid of, and titles I'm not going to get rid of, and titles that there's no way you'll get it when you pry it from my cold dead hands. So that was one of the things that I was kind of doing as I was going through the Oscars. I was looking at different titles, and this last order I made from DCBS, I dropped those a couple titles I did not include, and I was like, okay, it's time. Well, you just got to make the call and pull the trigger. So it's going to be interesting going forward, not getting everything.
Well, you know what's kind of interesting, too? When we have those discussions on the show, it'll be fun when it's a title that maybe you're not currently reading, you haven't been reading regularly, that, you can say, hey, this is a title I haven't been reading regularly, and did that make you want to read it again? Because, titles have story arc shifts, they have creative shifts and things like that, and sometimes you may decide to pick up a title again that you dropped and drop something else, maybe that you aren't enjoying as much, and that I think will lead to interesting commentary and honest commentary on the show. So that's kind of cool that you're doing that. I have a backlog of stuff too. Actually, part of preparing for this was I had to get caught up on some titles that I've been backlogged for a lot of the reasons you're talking about. It's not quality, it's not that I'm not enjoying, it's time. And I don't just read DC titles. So it's, there's certain favorite titles. A book like Morning Glories, for example, is one of my favorite titles that from Image. I will never drop Morning Glories in a million years. I think it's just a great book. But, that leads into some of my time that, comes to reading DC books as well. But that's true for all of us as fans. And I honestly, if we only read DC stuff, I think you lose a little credibility anyway. Because, I'm a comic fan. I love, all of comics. It's not just a DC thing. This is a fun project from you, though, whenever we do this Raging Oscars thing, because it's a chance to really look at an entire line, and I am reading the entire line. I'm enjoying reading the entire line. Like you said, the idea needs to be about fun. So when I did my top 5, what I did is I did a top 5 list with each line of how I'm feeling. In some cases, it's ranking the titles on where I'm at. Other times it was ranking like events or happenings or something like that. I also threw in a big surprise when it was appropriate, and a disappointment from that line, if there was any. So that was kind of the way that we did that. And I started with Superman Family like you did. Do you want to start first? You want to kick us off with what you did with Superman Family? I'd like to see what you did.
Oh, okay. Well, what I did, and I'm not going to be singing this year, because I had a couple people say, you're not singing this year, are you? And just because there were people who actually went out of their way to send me an email telling me not to sing, it almost had me doing it. But I decided, you know what, I did it last year, I'm going to do something a little different, or actually I'll talk. And for me, this was more about feelings of what the different titles. There was a couple moments where I'm like, I gotta say, I love this particular moment. But for me, it was more about an overall discussion on story arcs and general feelings and consensuses on the different titles. And when I started looking at the Superman title, the first thing that really popped out for me was the young Clark and the early days of Superman that we got in Action Comics, and just that first birth of him, the first build of him, and just anytime they go back to showing us young Clark, anytime they go back to showing us where he came from, why he is who he is. And I think that's something that is so important and so vital in Superman. When you have this character who is godlike powers, there's no way a mere mortal could actually conceive or understand what he's doing and how he's doing it. Well, with Clark, we get that. We see it. He's a character that I've constantly referred to as Clark, not Superman, even though Superman is one heck of a super awesome hero. And he's one of those guys, I'm like, dun, 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 it's Superman. But I always refer to him as Clark, even in the costume, because I'm so connected to him, so close to him, so understanding. And with the relaunch, they really needed to make sure I still had that locked in. Mm-hmm. And I still had that type of feeling and friendship and just that camaraderie I had with him. And I still do. And that's something I'm just so glad that in Superman that I have this stuff. And it's been kind of a really cool, experience. And, it's funny. It's one of my things that I love, but it's something I want more of. And it's kind of the addict mentality that I have sometimes, where I'm like, yeah, this one is great, but 10,000 of that would be wonderful. Give me a whole title of just young Superman. Give me a title of just Ma and Pa Kent. Give me more. And I just want more of this Clark, even though they're showing it, and they're showing it in the stories, and they're pulling it up when it's appropriate. And it's quality writing in the Superman titles that have made me enjoy this and made me want more from the character and from his past.
So like I said, I did mine in a top 5 format, and one of the things, my number 5 was Superboy's creative shifts have actually worked, and the book has maintained what I've enjoyed since the beginning. I think it's important to note, because sometimes when you have a creative shift on a title, it derails it. And there are titles where I was disappointed in how they just seemed to have a weird flow because you had major creative shifts along the way. Superboy's one of those that it's a story about a clone who evolves and grows beyond his limitations. It's a story about free will winning out over control destiny. And I was not into this idea at all of rebooting Superboy, because I loved the character before the New 52. But it's funny, as his friendship base has grown in the superhero teen community, so has my attachment to him, which is a sign of great character development. I've really enjoyed the work of all creators attached to this character. So my number 5 was really just how Superboy seems to have just maintained this consistency all the way through of a nice flow and development of a character who now I'm really attached to. And I think that's just my number 5 moment for the Raging Oscars for this year for Superman books. I really have been enjoying Superboy.
And it's funny you talk about Superboy, because I had one of my moments just themes that they had, and this was the development of Superboy and Supergirl. They took these two new superheroes, two young heroes who both are strangers. The strangers in a strange land. Well, these two really are strangers. They really have no idea what's going on around them. Superboy born in a lab. Kara's born on Krypton, and she's landing on Earth. She doesn't speak the language. She has no idea what's going on. And just these characters, their growth and development as heroes, their growth as people, has been something that I really, again, it was firing on all cylinders for me, that I was like, man, this is cool. This is a great Supergirl story. This is a great Superboy story. But there's so much room for growth and places to go with this, that now that we're going to start seeing even further, and it's going to grow and kind of draw me in even tighter on these titles. This has been a great layout and a great strategery of the title.
It's funny you mentioned Supergirl as well. Supergirl, it's not that it didn't make my top 5. It was a book that I really wanted to give a special mention to, so I put that in my biggest surprise category. The reason why is I was a huge fan of what Sterling Gates and Jamal Igle had done with evolving the Supergirl character. And just that book was just a must-read book for me. So this was another character that I was really afraid with them rebooting her, that she was going to become unlikable, I wasn't going to relate to her, because I thought that the character really had a nice development and evolution under that creative team, taking her to the point where I thought that was like a definitive Supergirl. I'm really adoring Supergirl. I didn't put it in my top 5 again because it deserves a special mention, but what's working for me is this attachment to the family and her Kryptonian history, and it's been really important to what I love about this book that we've seen this Kryptonian mythos expanded upon. We've seen her look back on her family's past and the question on what, did dad kill mom? Did mom kill dad, I should say, because of dad sending Kara to Earth, and what went on Krypton. And these chances for Supergirl to have closure to the death of loved ones that are important to her. I really had this sense of she had friends on Krypton. It wasn't just her and her parents, and sometimes that's something that when you only show a limited amount of a character's history, you don't get this sense that the world that they came from was rich and vivid and alive. I really feel like in the New 52, one of the strengths, and in Supergirl especially, is this idea that Krypton was a living, breathing place. There were other people there other than Kara's family and Clark's family. And that's something that's been expansive, especially with things like Kandor, that I think is really essential to the whole Superman mythos, that I think Supergirl has done really well. And it's played out very well in crossovers. This is a book that I've liked since the first issue, have grown to adore and love, and it was a book that I was really worried about from the start. So I wanted it to be in my biggest surprise category because I was really shocked over my attachment to it. I kept wanting to put it somewhere in the top 5, and I was really having trouble figuring out where to put it because the book's very important to me. And I think it fits in this biggest surprise category for me because it was such a shock over how much I was digging my heels in over the Sterling Gates and Jamal Igle run. Because I really walked into this one figuring to myself, it's just not going to be as good. And I really feel it is, in a different way. It's doing a different thing. And I think it's just as valid, just as rich, and just as exciting.
It's funny, one of my points kind of goes right along with that. But it was about Krypton itself. and just the usage of Krypton, the usage of Kryptonian society, just the lore, the legend, going back with the clone with the Khan and the Khan-El, and eventually we know he's going to be called Connor eventually down the line, and it's just everything that they're pulling from the Kryptonian mythos, pulling it in right from not right from relaunch, but they've given it some time, and now they're developing it, and they're using characters like Supergirl. They're using characters like Hel or however you want to call him. It's to explain and express and show what life was like on Krypton, and that was something that I was really glad to see, because I started thinking back to how much I really knew about Krypton, and you had to get like a special story. You had to get, a side miniseries or something like that to actually see life on Krypton. In the main regular title, I don't recall, massive lengthy story arcs where they delve into, life on Krypton, what it was like in the different cities and whatnot. So I was kind of very happy to see that, see it tie in with current story arcs. And that's, one of the things where I hope they continue it. But it's weird because one of my wishes, I wish they would do more with Metropolis, whereas they've done with Krypton. And that's something I was thinking, this would be a kind of a neat idea to show us a day in the life of the regular Metropolis person. Show us what Clark is like at the planet, what, Lois's job is like. Nothing, superhero, giant robot or anything like that. Just show us the life in Metropolis. What is, what the everyday person goes through. I think that would be a great, just even if it's just a one-shot issue, if it's tied in with, an overarching story arc, show us what, the average everyday person's, how they see Superman, how they see the events happening around them. I think that would be something that, again, it's another moment that could pull us in as the readers into the life that is these superheroes.
Kind of like what Gotham Central used to do with the police department in relation to Batman's world.
Exactly.
I really like that idea. And actually, I'd take it one step further. I want to see more Krypton, too, for the exact same reasons that you're mentioning with Metropolis. I'm not taking anything away from what you said, because amen, 100% I agree with you. But I think these things add to the mythos, and that mythos is really important to me. If you're going to reboot the DC New 52, you've got to start putting back into place, and it's okay to rework them, make them new, make them fresh, and do all that, but you've got to put back in place the pieces of the puzzle that made the universe before the New 52 as rich and vivid and exciting. And these parts that we're mentioning here, Metropolis, Krypton, all that stuff, has been so richly developed since, the launch of these characters way back in the beginning, that you need to put those puzzle pieces back in place in a way that makes sense and feels fresh and new, yet also feels familiar. And that's something that's really important. My number 4, I had Shali Fish on backups in Action Comics. I have really enjoyed these for a lot of actually what we're talking about now. They have expanded Superman's world, hit on the questions about the background in a way that is moving and exciting. It's just terrific writing. The art is always spot on. I just think that their pieces, a lot of times we talk about Grant Morrison's work, which is amazing, but it'd be a mistake to ignore the great stuff that Shali Fish is doing in those backup stories, because I think that they have expanded the world in a lot of the ways that we're talking about here that I think have made the Superman universe really excited to me. So that's a part of Action Comics that I'm really digging on a major level.
Oh God, yeah. And with me, when I look at like the current Hell on Earth story that's going on, and I started like trying to figure out like a moment or a point in time or a concept of it. And for me, it was the coming together of the Superman family within this title. Up until this point, we had these, 5 separate titles doing their thing, and, or 4 separate titles doing their thing, and, you get some cool character stuff, but you get this one big overarching story arc going on, and you're seeing the family come together. You're seeing Superman react with Superboy and Supergirl, and it's, it was a great story. I really enjoyed it, but it's one of those things where now that it's over, I see either further greatness coming out of it. This was a great ground, just a nice, groundbreaking, story arc that will actually start towards developing a Superman family. And for me, that's something that you need in the Superman titles. I want to see Superman and Supergirl and Superboy, all of them interacting, doing either just things together, but doing stuff not in costume. It's, again, I love seeing Clark. I like seeing him interact with people. Well, let's have the others kind of tie in with that. And I think the Hell on Earth story has begun that process, and it's something that it was at the right time. It didn't jump right into it saying, "Oh, everybody gets along." No, there's going to be issues, and there's still not 100% family. There's still going to be growth. There's still going to be stuff that they have to work out. But we have this beginning of this, and I think that's what you need in this story. Every story has a beginning, middle, and end. Well, we have now our intro. We have our beginning. Now the characters will start growing and developing. There'll be some changes, some flows, and just some whatnot behind this family and some meat behind them. And that, I think, is a great moment, and it just is a good time for the Superman titles.
My number 3 was Superman works just fine in jeans and a T-shirt. I really like that because every so often you get this reminder, and when it comes back in things like Hell on Earth, like you were mentioning, but we've seen it in action, there's something about that look when we see it. It feels classic, which Superman needs. I want to feel Superman's classic. I love the story of the Kryptonian armor. I didn't think I'd like that, and it took me a while to get used to the idea, as I've mentioned on the show previously, but I like the armor suit now. I liked the way it's been used in things like Hell on Earth. But it's great to see every so often Clark not wearing it. And that was something that worked well in reminding us that he's Superman. That's something that I really need. I've enjoyed the whole 5-year storyline and build. It's funny how I think with certain characters, this 5-year meshing has worked fine. Superman's been one of them where I think this just makes sense. It feels like a 5-year build for this character. I can place that time, and it all just feels like it's not crammed in there, if that makes sense. And it's one of those characters where I just feel that's working. I don't always feel that works. I feel sometimes I've got to really suspend my disbelief. You mean, oh, that happened in 5 years? But Superman, I don't feel that way. And he's a character that I think has really benefited from this. I love the accessibility of the title. It's working really well. It's feeling classic Superman to me. It's a lot of, I go back to Byrne's Man of Steel. Byrne's Man of Steel tried to do a lot of what this is doing and did it very successfully, where it modernized in that era Superman while not throwing Superman out the window. I feel that Superman in Action Comics has done the same thing. And I think we're seeing it working out in stories like Hell on Earth, where this is the Superman that has been built in Action Comics to here. So that's something that I've really richly enjoyed, and I'm really very into the Superman universe because of stuff like that.
Yeah, it's funny because when I was sort of thinking about this, I wanted to pick a favorite moment because I am a Superman guy. And so I started going through everything, and it was funny because one of the more recent titles I was reading came up with my favorite moment. And it was, as I was reading it, I sat there and I cheered out loud. And I gave a big old hoorah as it was playing out. And it's the Kents Aren't Quitters. It's with the end of the Hell on Earth story arc that's going on. It was a great moment where, one, in the middle of the battle, you see Clark not quitting, but you get this little temporal distortion where Clark goes back into the past, and he's, present day Clark Kent in the costume, talking to his pa, and it was supposed to be the night of the, Clark's big prom, the night that the parents die, and everything that had all this momentous moment. And, they're sitting there, Pa is sitting there going, hey, he knew he was dead. As Clark's sitting there telling, hey, I got to tell you all this stuff. He's like, well, if you got to tell me this, that means I'm not there to experience this. I'm not there. And you can kind of see for a moment, Clark's like, oh, crud. But Pa was okay with this because not only, he was at peace, but he knew his boy was happy and he was helping people. I think that was just this great moment. And going right from one time where there's like, he comes to the realization, hey, I'm going to die. We all do every day. But you know what? You're not going to lay down because Kents aren't quitters. And you just see the two moments of them together. And it was just something that was like, this is just a great Superman moment. This is a great kind of, I was like, man, this is awesome. And it was one of those things that will lock always in my head as a Superman mantra. Kents aren't quitters.
I'm going to throw in my disappointment here and then jump to my number 2 because they really go well together. My disappointment for the Superman family line was the initial launch of the Superman title. And I'm really taking that up till Scott Lobdell took over. Now, don't get me wrong here. I'm not saying the book was bad. It was a good book. I never considered dropping it or anything like that. I enjoyed the development of the Daily Planet staff and romantic opportunities for Lois and Clark that predate his relationship with Diana. And, there were some killer art moments, including Nicola Scott's art when she came on, to, make me believe in the new suit with its majesty. I do think it's one of those books, though, the creative shuffling made it hard for the book to get momentum. And I think all the creative involved prior to Scott Lobdell coming on board did an admirable job. It wasn't a bad book at all. It just, when you're comparing it to the monster that is Action Comics, I wasn't getting that same impact from Superman that I was getting from Action Comics. Action Comics was must read. Superman was a good read. And that's kind of where it stayed for me. Then for my number 2, this is where I picked out a single issue. I remember when issue 0 came out with Scott Lobdell and Kenneth Rocafort on art. They did this background storyline of Krypton looking at Superman's family. And it built to that wonderful moment at the end where we see that Clark is on Krypton. And there was something about that issue that it just felt like it was building to something. It felt like, wow, this is exciting. And it led to that whole Hell on Earth storyline. And we still haven't seen the payoff of where did that moment come from? Which is, that means there's an anticipation of, okay, where did that come from? I want to read that. That's still there for me. There's an excitement. And so much has happened since then. That was a moment that had really turned around Superman and made Superman a must-read. It went from a good title to a must-read title, to the point where I have trouble deciding right now which book I'm enjoying more between Superman and Action Comics. And I'm going to be honest, there's times where Superman is really edging out Action now because of how good it's gotten. And that's the strength of where this creative team has taken it. It's everybody who's currently working on the Superman title is really taking it to a level that I feel that it should have. I like when my favorite titles are combating each other because they're that good. And that's what's happening right now in the line. I think that momentum needs to continue. DC needs to be really careful to make sure they've got strong creative teams with a strong creative direction and to let the creative teams breathe those directions out in a way that's consistent with the Superman family that's being crafted. You've got to do that. Let a creative flow, a long-term creative flow. What's exciting for me right now, again, is there's certain things that there haven't been a payoff yet. I want to read as a reader. Anticipation's essential in serialized storytelling. That's what I'm looking forward to moving forward. So it was funny how that disappointment has led into my number 2 moment where it's great to see Superman as a title feeling must read. Took a good book, made it an amazing book. I want to see more of that. I want to see that continue. That's really, really important. And that only comes from a consistency of a creative team with a direction long term that builds us as a reader with anticipation. I want anticipation in my comics. It's essential to me. And that's what my number 2 moment is.
Yeah, for me, it was funny because I started thinking about like surprises and everything that, and the biggest surprise for me, and you've heard me gush about, a couple minutes now about the Superman titles, but my biggest surprise is that the Superman titles aren't my favorite titles right now. Even though I absolutely love Hell on Earth, I'm loving where it's going. I see this great direction of the title. My biggest surprise is that I'm more of a Batman fan right now. And that's, it's because, and I don't want to sound like I'm knocking anything in the title, because the title is spectacular. But the Bat books are really just throwing out some amazing stuff that it's kind of, I'm like, I keep saying I'm a Superman guy, but in reality right now I'm wearing a Bat shirt. And but as you're talking though, I got to echo your sentiment, how you were saying about with the slow start in the build and just everything that's gone through. And, picking a favorite Superman title for me would be almost impossible. I think probably Superman is edging Action right now, but that could change with the next read.
It's funny how you're mentioning that you're more of a Superman guy, but you're wearing a Batman shirt. I'm more of a Batman guy, and I'm wearing Superman's underpants over my pants because he's not allowed to.
Okay, that's a visual I really don't want.
It's a visual I don't really want either. My wife doesn't either.
Please tell me you got a towel tied around your neck and it's a cape and you're running around, right?
No, if I was running around, you'd hear that. Oh. Whoosh. My number one actually is Action Comics. And I'm not going to do this justice. I want to throw out Grant Morrison, Gene Ha, Art Lyon, Rags Morales, and really the whole creative team involved. I'm leaving out a whole bunch of names of colorists and inkers and letterers and stuff like that. This book returned my sense of wonder to Superman. I was very worried about the reboot of this character. I'm a huge fan of Lois and Clark being married. This title, though, has reimagined Krypton. It's Superman's initial time in Metropolis, how humanity would react to him, other worlds, wacky concepts. We've got Kandor. We got all kinds of crazy stuff going on in Superman that I really love being introduced. That sense of wonder. You know, we've got Mixius Pitlick's world being brought back in. I love the lady that is landlord and that whole bit. There was endearing special moments that made me smile in a way that Superman books need to. There needs to be that balance of high action, high adventure, and then those small town moments. And it's not about being in Smallville. It's about the guy that came from there coming through in a way where you feel like this is just a nice fella that, like, you believe in, you would follow into a battle. He feels like a leader because he knows who he is, and he keeps stepping up, especially when it's hard, with his powers. How sometimes he feels disconnected, but then shows you how to be more connected than anyone else possibly could be. And that's some of the magic and majesty of Superman that has come through in the Action Comics title that has made it a must-read book for me. There have been many weeks where I'm a Batman guy where I have trouble not jumping to Action Comics first. And that's with battling with all these great Batman books that are out there, because I'm really digging that world that much. And that's the reason why. And that's why Action Comics really needs to be my number one thing. I think that read has been very consistent to me. And I just wanted to note that because it's been a very, very special run. You're going to replace Grant Morrison on this book, which when Grant Morrison's leaving, it's not the DC saying, you got to go. It doesn't work that way. I'm sure they'd keep him on it forever. But you got to make sure that title has got a flow and a direction that feels as big. You've got to let the creative team that's coming in breathe and have a big direction, because you've got to keep that special nature of this book. This is Action Comics. It's supposed to be a flagship title. It has felt like a flagship title. This feels like one of the first comic books ever created, and it feels like it's something that today is cutting edge. It needs to keep that. And that's something that's really important to me because it's felt that big, that special. So it definitely deserves a number one for the Superman family spot because of what that book is and its impact. Got anything else for Superman family?
No, I think we're good.
Let's jump onto the Batman family then. Jim, where'd you start off with the Batman family?
Well, I started off with what I'm calling the quote-unquote redemption of Jason Todd. Mm-hmm. Now, he's not completely clean by any, stretch of the imagination, but you're seeing strides of him return to the family. And if there's one thing that I really do like, especially about the New 52, is what it appears to me that Jason wasn't as big a villain as he was in the previous universe. With his fall, with his death, his return, it seems like he, of course, caused Bruce some grief, but he didn't seem like a full-on quote-unquote villain. I think he has a lower body count than he had in the past universes. I think there's a lot less, just questionable business tactics. If you think back to some of the stuff that Jason did in the past, where he was kind of running criminal elements and, he was taking out drug dealers, but he was taking them out because they were his competition, not just to take them out. Here, this universe, I got the feel that it was more of he was taking them out, taking them down hard. He wasn't following the code of the Bat, but he was still going after the villains. He was doing it his way. And I like the fact that they didn't, to me, it doesn't seem like they did the full-on evil Jason Todd. He's going against the code. He's not following what Batman said, but he's not following because he thinks Bruce was wrong. And he's like, this is the way you do it. And now as these titles have, fleshed out with everything that's gone on through the court up through, death of the family, we're seeing Jason kind of come back to the fold. It's going to take some time, I'm not expecting, him to pose in the next family portrait, but there's definitely is going to be, a better dealings and a more comfortable association between them. And that's something that you get out of the Bat family. That's something I want to see. I want to see all the brothers working together. I want to see Batman and his sons, fighting crime. I want to, it's, Jason's that guy that I was like, man, come on, he can do it. And I've always sort of backed him as wanting to see the redemption. I want to see it. Well, we're seeing it again through this. We're seeing, a little bit dirtier, a little bit darker, but he's still there. He's still, there's still that Jason Todd there, and we're gonna see, I think we're gonna see somebody who is openly accepted by the Bat family, coming down the line. Who knows? It could be another year from now before it happens, or it may happen before that with everything that happened to Damian. I don't know. But there's definitely gonna be, some more growth and development in Jason, especially in his title with his crew. And I love the fact that how they're doing that with, it's not just him who needs a little bit work. It's everybody around him, and they're all helping each other. They're strengthening each other, and they are, going to be, kind of the supportive structure for each other.
It's funny. I had to sneak in Red Hood and the Outlaws into my Young Justice category because I had so much stuff in Batman that I needed to talk about that I couldn't find anywhere else. But I'll talk about it now, seeing as you have already gone there, because I agree with you. One of the things that I'm enjoying is the battle of ideologies. It's not so much that Jason's become a bad guy. It's that his philosophy on how to handle situations due to everything has been through. There's that moment in Red Hood and the Outlaws post the death of Damian and post death of the family and all that stuff that's going on with Red Hood and the Outlaws. The death of the family stuff was really great, where he was back at actually he and Damian were having some great moments together, where you see the nods that the two of them have a lot of similarities, but you also see the nods that Bruce acknowledges the differences he has with Jason, but's willing to vouch for Jason, which was a unique thing. He doesn't agree with the methods, but can't argue with the results. And that's an interesting... So I don't know that I necessarily need to see Jason get a full-on high five, I'm back in the Bat family kind of thing. I liked that moment in the Batcave where there was that acknowledgement of respect between the two of them. Yet both of them, not being able to fully say all the things that they wanted to be able to say to each other, or maybe couldn't even realize they wanted to say to each other. The moment with him and Dick Grayson, in that moment with Starfire, and showing us that, Dick Grayson was in a place after all of that, with every tragedy that happened with death of the family, that he couldn't see Starfire. He couldn't let those feelings open. And probably recognizing that if he did see Starfire, he would hurt Starfire emotionally with how he would react to her, having to push her away. Yet showing that Dick Grayson caring side, and Jason having to acknowledge, I will never, let anything happen to her. I will never hurt. I will protect her. Those type of things. The feelings that Jason has for Starfire, showing that Jason is a good guy underneath all that. That he's trying to do the right thing underneath all that. I don't always agree with how Jason handles things. Yet I like Jason. That's one of the things that I think they've nailed. What I liked about Jason Todd since he's been returned, and have taken away a lot of the stuff, the inconsistencies that I didn't like about him when he returned. Because he seemed like a character when he returned and was restored by Judd Winnick, that depending on who was writing him and what storyline he was in, people didn't quite know him. Didn't quite understand the character. So you got a lot of inconsistencies with the guy. It seems in the New 52 they have a really clear idea who he is, why he and Batman butt heads, what they disagree about, yet also that these are two people that at their core do respect certain things about each other, yet they're almost afraid to acknowledge those things that they respect about each other because you don't want to give too much of a nod to that person's philosophy. And it's that battle of philosophies that I don't know that I want to lose. And I think if you give him a full-on acknowledgement, you're going to lose that battle of philosophies. Yet every time I've seen him in Batman Inc., I've seen him in Death of the Family, working with the team, you get why he works with them well. And he belongs there. it's an interesting balance. Like, he's that middle child, that like just kind of, he fits in, but he doesn't fit in, and yet he loves them, yet he's angry with them. And there's something about that just feels so natural that it's infectious. I'm digging Jason Todd so much so. And that's why I threw him into Young Justice, because I needed somewhere to say all this, because I think he's super cool. So I threw him in the Young Justice because I figured, okay, he's like a teenish character. I could fit him in here because I would be remiss if I didn't mention in the Raging Oscars how much I enjoy reading Jason Todd. I think he's just a great character. So I'm glad you brought this up, because I ditto. I totally agree with you. But can I go to? Let me go to my number 5, seeing as I kind of diverted on there. My number 5 is a tie, and it's one of the only ties I think that I did through this entire thing. Legends of the Dark Knight Returning is a digital first series, and John Layman on Detective Comics. They were two things that I really wanted to acknowledge. First of all, I love Legends of the Dark Knight. To me, that book has always been about creativity. You can do one-shot stories. You can do 3-issue stories. You can do 5-issue stories. Whatever creator has in them, they can feel like they're in continuity. They can feel like they're not in continuity. They can explore themes from Batman that you've always want to see explored, or themes that you want to see explored in a different way. I'm loving this series. It's a great digital first title. I get giddy whenever it's released. It's one of those that I sometimes tend to stockpile. And it's okay, because sometimes I like to just sit down and page through like 4 or 5 of them. And it's great having them in that format. I love the way it reads on my iPad. I know it's also published as a paper title, so I'm not taking anything away from the paper version. I just read it that way, so I'm going off of that experience. I've really been enjoying this as just great supplemental Batman material. And my hats off to every creative team member that's been a part of those books, because that's the experimental Bat book. And I've always loved it for being that. And I hope it's doing well. I hope that people are digging it and trying it. It's just a great opportunity to jump on that title. They're individual stories. They don't follow a continuity, so you can jump on at any point in time, and I can't recommend it enough. That 99-cent price point is just really great for me. I always, it's funny, when Wednesday comes around, I tend to go to DCB Services' site, and I'll click on, their purchasing from that, and I'll grab all my digital at that time. So I don't really buy them daily. I usually go once a week, maybe twice. Sometimes I'll hit like on a Friday or Saturday and make sure I didn't miss anything. But I typically tend to get all of them, because the way that it works when you go, if you've never done it before, you go down to the digital releases section, and I will grab that. And I'm also grabbing my Valiant titles that way. So if Valiant pushes out anything, it tends to wind up in that same digital first section. So I grab DC's 99-cent digitals. I grab any of my Valiant titles, and I just tend to read those books that way. They tend to be the ones I don't read in paper. And I think it's just a great delivery method. John Layman on Detective Comics. Detective Comics has been another book that's been a good book. I've been enjoying it. We had that whole beginning intro when the series kicked off of the Joker's face being cut off and stuff like that. But it's always been the one that's kind of been lost in the midst of the monsters that are not just Batman, but Batman and Robin, which I'll talk about later. But Detective Comics has been for me since John Layman's come on board. I'm loving this whole Penguin storyline. Emperor Penguin? I think that stuff is just great. I've loved his issues that have tied into the events that have been going on. They felt like they've had impact. He's a writer who I think just really gets Batman, gets how to play in this Batman world where it's consistent, but yet at the same time has crafted a title that feels unique, relevant, rich, and edgy. And that's really important, because there's a lot of great Bat titles right now. And your book's got to stand out as being something different, but yet it has to feel like it belongs when you're dealing with the Batman books that are in continuity. And Detective Comics has that balance under John Layman has been restored. I think he's done a really great job with his book. And I was like trying to figure out what to put in for my number 5, and it was constant battle. I don't want to not acknowledge Legends of the Dark Knight, but I would be remiss if I don't mention what John Layman's doing in Detective, because I'm really digging that book. So that's why I tied those two, because I literally, the battle I'm having presenting it right now is the battle I was having this whole week trying to finalize this particular portion of it. And I'm like, you know what? They belong there, because there's no way I can resolve this other than to say these are two equally important things to me right now that I think are really cool.
Well, I'm glad you did that, because what I'm going to do is that, the Detective Comics, especially the stuff with the Emperor Penguin, that was my number 6. I was trying to figure out a way I could pull it in, and I was going to maybe make it a surprise. Maybe it was going to be something else, but I'm actually going to combine something later on. Okay. So I'm going to throw that out as one of my points as well, because for me, it was not only just the story being told. I had no idea how the heck the Emperor Penguin was going to survive, because he was throwing it out against the Penguin. And they did a great story which explains that this guy, he knows what he's doing. He's got some strategy on his own. I wasn't going to do that to you twice in the same podcast, but he's got some style to him. And I absolutely loved just how he's still alive. It completely threw me, shocked me, surprised me. I was just like, oh my God, this is a great way. This was wonderful. I'm now rooting for the guy, because you know what? This is a great character. This is a great villain. I want to see him go up against Batman. I want to see him deal with the different elements of Gotham. Now, I want eventually to see the Penguin just, get his revenge and whatnot. That's going to be a beautiful, wonderfully sick, twisted, amazing story when it comes out, because the Penguin is going to have his day of reckoning. There's going to be that moment of, oh, crud, I messed with the Penguin. He's going to have that realization. But until that happens, I am deeply enjoying this character, and I'm so glad that you did that combined, because I wasn't going to do it this time. I was like, no, I'm only going to have 5. Well, now I'm combining 2 of my points. So that's definitely completes echoing your sentiments on Detective and especially the Emperor Penguin story.
I'm almost positive it's the only time that I did it. I won't know until we get through. I got like 10 pages here to go through. But that was one where to the point where I had to throw Red Hood and the Outlaws in with Young Justice, because I needed to get that in as well. So it was really an interesting shuffling of trying to find spots for things, so I didn't go over that, because I was trying not to, and that was one where I couldn't resist. Do you want to go on to your number 4 point?
Well, that was.
Okay. I didn't know with your shifting. Sorry about that. My number 4 was restoring Gail Simone to Batgirl. So there was no need for me to riot. With her, it's never been blind loyalty. It's month in, month out. I think she's a unique, creative mind. Her writing speaks to me in a way that's very unique and very fresh every time. I love the way that she tries to throw a wicked edge into things where it belongs, gets to the core of who characters are, just makes me go, she did not just do that. And I think that's really, really great. I love the build of this book, especially the James Jr. material, the direction of things with Nightfall and the various villains that have been introduced throughout the series, how, they weren't just throwaway villains. They're going to come back. They're going to be a part of Nightfall's crew. That's something we've got to look forward to. I'm a fan of writers having a chance and creative teams having a chance to develop longer form stories. She remains my favorite writer because of her can't-miss storytelling skills. Her ability to make me feel the scars that Barbara has been working through slowly. To not only work back to what she was, but to become something more has been something that has really grabbed me in this book. So my number 4 moment was the craziness that went on with she's off the book, then she's back on the book, and how that just turned out with her being back where she belongs on that title, because I feel it's a title that there's so much that she has set up that needs to be paid off, that I am so glad that whoever was smart enough to recognize she needs to be put back there did it, because I want to see the payoff of this. And I've loved what she's done with crossovers. I've loved how she's just been a part of it. I think that she really understands the character of Barbara, but not only the character of Barbara, but how she interacts with this DC universe and with other characters. I think that's a strength of a writer too, that they're able to somehow make all that work while telling their own unique story that makes us feel forward momentum of that character, independent of those storylines, but also playing within those storylines. That's an interesting balance that you have to know how to write in a universe where other writers are involved to make your book feel like it really is relevant and belongs in all of that. It works here.
Well, let's keep the Gail Simone love going, because my next point was actually within the Court of Owls story. It was her Talon, Mary. Mm-hmm. This by far my favorite Talon. It was just a absolutely wonderful character who, she had the style that you would expect, just the flair and the fire, and to the point where not only was she able to kind of fight back the court's influence, and she's able to kind of insert her own personality, her own personal strength, she's still around in the DC universe. Yeah, she's over right now in Birds of Prey, but this is a character that had such strength that they're like, okay, we can't kill off this talent. We have to keep this one around, just and let her continue growing and growth. And I want to see her. I'd love to see Mary back in the Batgirl title. Just Gale again. A little bit of control and just her telling the furthered story of the character, because when eventually she's going to come back, and when she does, we'll get even more just great moments between her and Barbara, and we're getting those moments in Birds of Prey. But it's something that I was just like, man, this is a talent that I was like, dang, this is really cool. And this is actually where I'm going to combine stuff, because when I started thinking of Talons, and I really wanted to talk about Mary, because she's there's something about Mary. But the other story in the Talon stuff was the Grayson backstory, with everything that happened to his family, how he was supposed to be a Talon, how he fought back, his family's history, his family's origin, everything that was told in there was just, again, it was a great usage of this backlog, this back history that is Gotham and its characters. And this was something I was like, wow, this is something I never even remotely thought would happen. The circus, the way Haley's circus was, and how the court took these different individuals with these skill sets and used them in their own little sick and twisted ways. I was just like, wow, that is just something that it was a complete shock, surprise, and it was just pure wonderment.
I'm going to go to my disappointment now and then jump to my number 3, if that's okay.
Oh.
My disappointment was the Dark Knight's initial launch in the New 52. I liked the whole bunny thing, and it was a gorgeous book, but it didn't have the same impact as the other titles for me. It felt like kind of the title that was off to the side. It wasn't really a part of everything, which was really hard for me, because I'm a Batman fan. I loved reading the book, but it just for some reason, it was always the one I got to last. I would stockpile it. Greg Hurwitz took over as a writer, and I think Greg Hurwitz has been doing a great job to restore this as a must-read book. So it's a little bit of a negative with my disappointment with where the book seems to have kind of floundered. It's been a beautiful book that kind of, was off on its own. Greg Hurwitz seems to be doing a great job of bringing it back. I'm enjoying it a lot more now. It's a book that's on my radar, where it's been kind of, it's hard for me to stockpile a Batman book. That's been one I've been stockpiling. And now I'm enjoying reading it again. So it's a disappointment that's improving. So I wanted to make a note of that, and it's the point I wanted to make there. But number 3, it's funny how I did the Batman books a little differently than I did the Superman books, and actually some of the other titles. In the other books, I seem to have ranked titles, and where they're at. With the Batman books, it's kind of like themes or ideas or concepts. Number 3, though, I wanted to talk about Scott Snyder. This dude just knows Batman. I've been a huge fan of this guy since American Vampire kicked off and his detective run with Black Mirror. And he's just somebody who, it seems like his name's on something, I want to read it. And his take on Batman, and extends to things like Swamp Thing and just anything that he's doing. Like, I'm excited for his Superman book, because he just gets comics, and I'm really digging what he's doing right now. I love seeing a comic name generating buzz. He's one of those guys, when I look at the sales numbers of DC Comics right now, and how we kind of for some reason it's become unpopular to pat on the back books like Batman because they're high sellers. I look at those sales numbers and I kind of see it a different way. I'm like, why is this quality of a title not getting more sales? You know what I mean? When I look at that, and I'm saying that not just of a DC thing, I look at Marvel titles and say the same thing. It's really sad right now that our top flagship titles in comics, that we're looking at those numbers and we as fans somehow kind of sometimes I see like on the internet, like snobbery, like we don't need to support those books because look, they're already hitting the numbers. And I'm like, no, it's just the opposite. We need to support all of comics that are enjoyable, whether it's a low selling title or a high selling title that you're digging, because none of these books are getting the numbers they should be. The quality's there in comics. And I would love to see more outreach of, when there's film and television shows and different things like that tie into these products. I'd like to see more outreach to a new fan base that could potentially read some of these titles and bundle them in a way that maybe makes sense to that. Like, try new creative things to get a new audience. I feel like sometimes comics are very content to stick with just reaching out to the current comic book fan, the current comic book audience base. I think it's a huge mistake. And I'd like to see, and I'm not saying I'm the answer guy for all that. I don't mean it that way. But I would love to see more experiments going on, and they've got to be carefully tailored experiments. I get that. There's not an unlimited advertising budget. I'm not being unrealistic, but I would still love to see more being done when we're looking at our top-tier titles and somehow saying that these numbers are great. They just aren't, because I think the quality is there right now. And when I say the quality is there, I mean with your highest-selling title and your lowest-selling title. I think it's disgusting that certain books are canceled that are top-quality books because they have low numbers when the quality is there with that title. And I think it really is because comics have become very content with shuffling around the current audience base and competing for the current comic fan instead of people getting clever and trying to reach out to a new audience base. Trying experiments to do that are careful and tactful experiments, reaching out in places that it makes sense. A great example would this be a game like Batman Arkham City. Huge seller. Why wasn't more being done to bring that audience base into comics? Yes, they did a great digital Arkham City comic, but I don't know that a lot of people that played the game are even aware that that comic exists. I got a problem with that. I know it's there because I'm a comic fan, but I don't see I don't see ads on gaming sites saying, hey, check out Batman Arkham City's tie-in comic book. And that's something that they rely on people searching and finding this stuff themselves instead of doing more to reach out. Like, I think on sites like IGN, there should be an ad for Batman Arkham City, the comic, or Arkham Unchained, Unhinged, I'm sorry, Arkham Unhinged. That there should be an ad for that right on that site, and it should have been while the game was out, at its height of popularity. Bring people in because people were digging that game because it was wicked cool. So it's stuff like that like when I see a Scott Snyder and I see a Gail Simone and I see all these great writers doing amazing things, that I'm like, you have an entry point with those comics to bring people in, and none of that's being done, and I don't get it. I think that is advertising dollars well spent, targeted. And that's only one example. I think you can take titles like Jonah Hex, All-Star Western, and advertise that on a site devoted to Westerns. You know what I mean? Because I think that comic, yes, it's got superhero ties because Jeremiah Arkham's in it. But man, is it I'm a fan of Clint Eastwood spaghetti westerns. Man, does that title tie in? So I'd love to see more of that because I feel as a fan, we're seeing great comics that maybe you're not a fan of, because they've got low comic sales numbers, but they're still great books that would have an audience base if we started getting more people to try out this industry. And I don't see the advertising going on targeted, using limited advertising dollars in a way to take a certain portion of it. I'm saying take your, if you've got, a certain amount of money, take 10% of it and say, let's take just 10% of our advertising dollars and try a risk with it. And if it pays off, we devote more dollars to that. If it doesn't, we take that money next year or next time around or when we get that budget again and shift it to something else to try and generate new fans. I don't see a lot of that being done, and it's got to be done. There's got to be like a casual audience that's developed again. I don't see it. And, it relies heavily on us as comic fans, which isn't a bad thing. But I think we should be only one avenue of bringing people into comics. I want to see more being done with that. Sorry, I know it's kind of a weird way to do an editorial on it, but when I see writing like Scott Snyder's and the top quality of the Bat titles right now across all of them, I just mentioned Greg Hurwitz on The Dark Knight. I think he's kicking that book up. There's plenty of opportunities for fans of The Dark Knight Rises film to be jumping on comics right now and getting the same amazing storytelling that they got in those 3 films. I think the books right now are in a perfect place to be drawing in that audience. You shouldn't need things like the character death of a Robin to get media buzz on comics. There should be more than that. And I'd like to see it. So that's just kind of, sorry, weird little side. You can go ahead with your next point.
Well, actually, it's kind of my number 2 point kind of fits into some of the stuff you were saying, especially about the writing. And for me, the reason I'm wearing a Bat shirt right now is because of, we've gotten some fabulous story arcs. We've gotten these really large, family encompassing titles with Court of Owls, with Death of the Family, with Requiem now. We have this reaction, just this great connection. And that's, I think, is why I'm saying right now I'm a Batman. I'm a Bat fan. This is, a great time to be a Batman fan because you're getting these massive in scope stories that could very easily get confusing, you could lose something, but it's only being used to strengthen the characters and to strengthen, and you're getting these wonderful stories that when they come out in hardback, I'm going to get them. When they come out in Absolute, I will be getting them. I'm already planning on getting these things as I'm thinking about, I got to trim my purchases. I got to cut back on what I'm buying. While I'm doing that, I'm thinking, but when this Absolute comes out, there's nothing that will keep me from, getting it. I will sell blood if I have to, but I'm buying that thing just because I want this all collected together. I want the oversized and so I can just sit there and ooh and ah over the story, over the artwork, over just this fabulous stories that I've been getting. And it's something that, again, it's Batman title, the Bat titles have been just hitting home runs that have been just a great time to be a Bat fan, a great time to be a comic book fan. That I'm going to kind of echoing a lot of your sentiments saying, come on, what's going on here? Where, the numbers should be a lot better than what they are, just because this is been some amazing stories and some amazing stuff that you can have conversations with complete and total strangers or with people who aren't comic book readers, and you can keep them interested in it. Believe me, I know. I've done this. I've had a lot of people ask me, hey, so what's new with Batman? Well, let me sit down and tell you what's going on. And they get that roll, and I was like, oh, God, I didn't just ask Jim a question about comic books. I get a couple people at work who've learned the hard way. But there's others that, they actually enjoy what I'm saying because they're like, oh, really? That sounds kind of cool. And so we're getting some amazing stuff out of the Bat titles. And I think that's part of the reason right now that I am a Batman guy. This is my universe right now.
Number 2 for me kind of surprised me. I really had a tough time with this list because I really wanted to put in a rank order that made sense to me, like what are the important things to me. Batman and Robin, and Peter Tomasi's work on that. Particularly when you take a look at the build of Damian Wayne and the concept of family that links so much to the emotional storytelling that Scott Snyder was doing and things that have happened in Batman Inc., it's amazing how Tomasi has really taken a look at those events, embraced those events, expanded upon those events in a way that has tugged at my heartstrings. Batman and Robin number 18, right after the death of Damian. I was choked up reading that. I have no problem saying that at all because that to me is a testament to the writer and the creative team, because that issue in and of itself, by itself, stands on its own as being just an amazingly emotional tale of a father who's lost his son in this type of world. But if you put that together with the build of Damian, this character that has I've read so many interviews recently with Morrison on what Damian was supposed to be and how short-lived he was supposed to be, and how his respect for Tomasi I thought was really classy with what Tomasi's done to expand the understanding of Damian and the emotional attachment to Damian. To me, made all of that mean so much more when it came down that I would be remiss if I didn't talk about how cool that book is. This book and Batman constantly wrestle for my top spot out of the 2 Batman titles that I'm really digging right now. And I put it there. It really was funny how my list changed after the release of issue 18 of that title, because I was so emotionally moved by that particular work that I was just blown away. And I afterwards I was like, oh, I can't leave my list the way that I had it. I've got to put that as number 2 for me, because that title is just amazing and what was done. And I think that family sense because it's something that is a part of Batman that's so rich. You know, I remember as a kid growing up with the title Batman Family, and that concept of family, as dysfunctional as it is, as crazy as all that is something that I think Tomasi has so embraced. I can't wait to see where this book goes next. It's a great read every month, and it's an example of quality comic book storytelling, and just really good material.
My number one and my surprise go hand in hand. So I'm going to actually say them both at the same time. And it actually goes right along with what you're saying, because my number one is Damian. Mm-hmm. The number one favorite thing I have going on in the Bat family has been this absolutely wonderful little monster. And my attachment to the character, was just something that losing him was very difficult. And I got really emotional when it came to his death and just everything that happened there. And I remember when we talked about it, I was at a calmer place when we talked about it, but I was still very emotional, still very like, I can't believe this. But it was, again, I said then and I'll say again now, it's a sign of great writing and great character development that I would actually be this emotional. I would be this connected to the character. And you talk about the Requiem issue where it's, you're like, oh my God, and that silent issue. You weren't afraid to admit you were choked up, dude. I was right along with you, man. That got to me. I'm just like, especially the dog moments when the Batmobile pulls in the dog's like, hey, Damian, where's he at? Huh? And just the look on the dog's face, he was like, hey, what's going on here? Huh? He's supposed to run out of the car. Where's he at now? And it was just like, it just completely ate me up. Because there's no way anybody could explain to the dog, hey, the kid's dead. He's never coming back. This is it. And, just how much he's affected so many lives. And I even remember thinking when he died, going, man, I wanted to see this. I wanted to see Damian's first date. That would have been hysterical. That would have been wonderful. And all these things I never will get to see. And then along the way, I realized that's what real parents go through. That's what real people go through when you lose someone so young. All these moments in life moments that we'll never get. It's part of the pain. It's part of the process. It's part of dealing with the death. And it was just, I went through the stages of grief. I went through all of that with this character. And this is a character in a comic book. This isn't a real person. But to me, he was real. And to me, it was just, I was like, oh man. And part of and as I said, my surprise is connected with Damian. And my surprise right now, where I'm at, I'm not angry. I'm not upset that they killed Damian. I think it was a great story. And I think his beginning, middle, end was just this absolute tale of a hero. This was the birth, the redemption of a person, his growth as a hero. And this was his life. It was very short. It was very brief. It was too brief for this kid, but this was his life. And I'm at this point now where I'm accepting it. I'm okay with this. I'm not going, okay, who's going to bring him back? Let's throw him in a Lazarus pit. I'm not at that point anymore. I'm not saying, bring him back now. I want him back. No, I'm okay with him being dead now. And I never really thought I would actually be at that point saying, you know what, this is a great story. This was really good. I'm glad they did this. I'm glad they did this way. I never thought I'd be happy that how they told this story. And again, it's great writing, and it has me anticipating what's going to happen next. Because, obviously, Bruce is not done with his grieving process. The Bat family is not done with the grieving process. There is going to be more that's going to play off of this. There's going to be more stories that come down the line because of Damian's death. And I want to see those stories now. I want to see where this goes. I want to see what happens to the character. Part of my talking about earlier about the redemption of Jason Todd. There's going to be, some more development and growth from Damian's death. It's going to mean, something a little bit more. The story isn't done yet. And I love that about this character. And I love that about what we're getting.
I'm going to go to my biggest surprise now, because it was something that originally the title was in my top 5 list, but it was in a different place. Batman Inc. number 8 was my biggest surprise. The death of Damian, as you're mentioning. And I put it there because it's amazing how, like, Batman Inc., with all the stuff going on with the Court of Owls and death of the family and, all that kind of stuff that was going on, that it was like Batman Inc. was there. It was a great, consistent title that I'd really been digging. But it was kind of, I didn't know how it fit into everything. Then bam, that happened, and all of a sudden it becomes the most relevant title. In typical Grant Morrison fashion, he crafts an event where it happens, and everybody's talking about it, and you're just like, whoa. And what I liked about it wasn't a death for no reason. There was a major impact. There was a major point being made. Even to the mythos of the sword. I saw in the interview that the sword, came from, the family history, showing, the tragedy that this family has got as part of its legacy. And I just sitting there, and those moments, I read Batman Inc. number 9. I'm not going to go spoilery into that because I don't think you've had a chance to read it yet. But I read that last night, and again, just kind of like, whoa. And I would say that with all the Requiem issues, and this is going to lead into my number 1 in a second. But just that impact of issue number 8 and the emotional, you talked about an emotional journey you went on with that. I went from hating the idea of Damian being dead to loving the brilliance of it and the gutsiness of it. To take a character and to let it, I love that, Morrison had an original idea for it and embrace the idea of letting it extend longer because it was something that was, I'm sure because these books were enjoying a lot of sales success and stuff like that. They were like, let's take it in this different direction. And we had this much longer run with Dick Grayson as Batman that was anticipated that I thought it was great how Morrison and everybody creatively kind of embraced that was something that people were digging and extended all this. I think when you hit that issue 8, could you imagine if that went shorter? This issue would not have had the impact that it did. Recognizing that fans were into this and not diverting from the path, but expanding the length of it because it was necessary, and recognizing how there's a chance to do some story development here that wasn't originally planned, but not diverting from the end game goal that Damian needed to die. That was going to happen. That was a part of the story. It's a pivotal part of the storyline. It meant more when it happened because they gave a chance for a lot of people to play in that sandbox. And when that issue hit, the gutsiness of it, the rationale behind it, sticking to your guns on it, it's funny how I'm just in a very different place from it now. You and I, when we originally talked about it on the show, were scrambling, saying, I don't care how you bring him back, bring him back. Now I don't know that I want that because I feel like with these Requiem issues, I feel like we've gone on this emotional journey that is so relevant. And it's funny how, when you take a character and you do it the right way, I loved every minute with Damian. I don't know that I want him back. Now, a great creator could come up with, admittedly, a great storyline to bring the character back, and I love Damian, so I'd love to see him again, sure. But there's a part of me right now that's kind of like, ooh, I'd like to kind of just reread all those issues and go on the journey again, versus necessarily having to see him back. I'm fine with this having an emotional resonance that will last with Batman the way that Jason Todd's case did for so long. It's not now. Maybe it's time for the Damian to be that thing that we look back and fondly remember as we see Batman eventually get a new Robin, and see the kind of evolution of that. Maybe the next Robin will be the new Tim Drake, or something like that. You know what I mean? Just kind of the next era is ready to begin after a certain journey. I don't know. But right now I'm in a place where I'm like, wow, was that all wicked cool? And I just really enjoyed that. And it's great that it was such an emotional roller coaster. I didn't feel comfortable putting that in my top 5 because I'm like, where do I put that? Because it really belongs in its own special spot. And the biggest surprise for me was just, first of all, that came. It's funny how knowing it ahead of time didn't change its impact, which sometimes. It's funny with the fact that we do a spoiler podcast. One of the reasons why we put warnings in the beginning of this show is because we don't want to ruin anybody's experience. We want to talk about these comics for those of you that have read them already. And for those of you that haven't read them, we want to really be able to go spoilery so you know what these books are about. And if you're missing them, maybe you can kind of say, I never tried picking that up because I didn't really understand the concept. And hopefully from our nonsensical chatter, you'll be able to say to yourself, hey, maybe that's a title I should be trying. Because we all have limited dollars, as you and I alluded to in the beginning of this. And our hope is through this show, if you're having titles that you're not digging, that we point you in that direction. So I'm not a spoilery guy. It's not about ruining somebody's experience. I knew that Damian had died before I read the issue. It had just as big of an impact, if not a bigger impact, I guess, having a chance to kind of process some of that beforehand and being worried about the guy and hoping there was some ending that would make me go, well, can't they bring him back? And there's something gutsy to me about all this. And because it isn't just a stunt, it's a story. That's what's important to me. I don't mind character death in comics. I don't mind if they bring a character back in comics. As long as all that stuff isn't a stunt, it's a story. I'm about the story. So do I think characters have to be permanently dead, or do I think they can't kill characters? No, I don't have a problem with that. It's cheapened when it's a stunt. When it's a story, there's emotional resonance. We are taken through a journey that matters and has impact. And if they can bring a character back with that same emotional resonance, or, with an impact to that character being back, Barry Allen's a great point for that for me. I'm loving Barry Allen right now. I think there's reasons to bring certain... Jason Todd, boy, do we do a nice little speech on that character being back. I'm digging him now in a huge way. I think he's relevant to be back. Because I want to see Bruce and Jason deal with this. These are two characters that, wow, there's a reason for these two to have conversations about all this. And I want to see that happen. That's stuff that's important to me. So that Batman Inc. number 8 is my biggest surprise. And let me just go to my number 1 real quick, because it was really funny when I took a look at the Batman lines. I wanted to come up with a number 1. This is obviously, I'm a Batman guy. This is my favorite line. And... it's sometimes with the Batman books, there's 1 or 2 books that are hitting it for me. It's amazing to me as this Batman line, New 52 line's been developed. There have been creative shifts along the way, and there's been some shuffling. 2 books that I think that they've restored recently that have been really on the upswing have been Detective Comics and Batman the Dark Knight. They were 2 books that I just think needed an upswing. So if you take all that and you take a look at that whole Batman line, and we put Talon, when you sent me your list, you put Talon and Birds of Prey in miscellaneous. So just so everyone knows, those 2 books, we're not ignoring them. They were put in another category, and I think there's a point to that. And we'll talk about those later. I know I'm talking about both of those later. But when we take a look at, Batwing, Batgirl, Batman and Robin, all that. Did you put Batwing in one of those? I don't remember.
I put Batwing in the Bat family.
Yeah, that's what I had him as too. When you look at all of these titles together, one of the things that I'm really digging is they've got brilliant creative teams. This is my number 1, who know how to build and weave a line of comics. And this goes through editorial. This goes through the writers. This goes through the artists. The people that have been working together through all this. I can't pretend to know what that relationship looks like behind the scenes. I can only experience it as a reader. And I can say, when you've got the Court of Owls, Death of the Family, the Death of Robin, all of these things have meant so much more because the isolated issues where these things happening, in and of themselves, are great stories. But when you take a sandbox like this and you expand it out to titles like Batman and Robin, Detective Comics, Batgirl, you do things in Nightwing. Nightwing is a title I had no idea where to put this in my top 5, and it belongs there. So my number 1 with this is really just to acknowledge everybody that's been involved in the Batman universe since the New 52 started. Because Nightwing is a title that's a favorite of mine, and its relevance of Nightwing and Batgirl and all of them fitting into this, and seeing like the Requiem issue of Nightwing, seeing the issues of Nightwing that tied into Court of Owls and to Death of the Family, and seeing how much that made this a richer world, breathing, vibrant, alive. These are events that are happening real time. You're trying to figure out which happened first, and how the Joker pulled off all of these things, and kind of in your own mind, working out your own timeline for everything, like a police detective almost would in this situation. How do you track a lunatic? I loved how that worked out. And then seeing the end game of each of those issues, putting them, we're like, okay, I don't know which of these he did first, but certainly they're all winding up here at this point. And, you're tracking the erratic behavior of a lunatic. I loved how that felt in Death of the Family. And why did it feel that way? Because all of that was going on, and it all came together at an endpoint where no matter which one of those events we all as readers try to put first in whatever order we're trying to put that in, there was an end game to follow there where everything came together and led right back into Scott Snyder's Batman issue. The impact of that final issue of Death of the Family made us then want to spread out from that and read the reactions to all of these characters to that event. That's brilliant writing from everyone involved. That mattered. It meant something to all of those characters, to all of those titles, and they did it in ways where I didn't feel with any of those titles that any of their storylines were dropped. I felt like they organically led into this, and now they're organically leading out of it. Brilliantly done. I remember growing up where there would be a crossover that would happen, and sometimes in titles they would even put a different writer on the crossover issue just because it was a one-off issue. Okay, they're doing this event, and blam, we're going to put this label on the top, and it's a part of it, and the issue didn't matter. You know, it just felt like it was cool as a reader to say, okay, my character's a part of this event? Yeah, but these issues all mattered. And I had to put that as my number one because I felt like this was a line. It wasn't just single separated issues. And how hard that must be creatively for everyone involved to be a part of an event without derailing your storyline. My hat's off to everyone involved in this. I'm sure in some cases it wasn't very easy to do this. You know, you had to get very clever in telling your storyline to make it work. But it paid off very well for us as readers. And I would be remiss if I didn't put that as my number one point, because to me, these were events that didn't feel weak. They felt like they were relevant. They felt like these characters have all been impacted by them. They will be something that for years to come, they will reference back to because they were all a part of it and their own books played off of them in such a brilliant way. Again, without derailing. And I think that's really important because I didn't feel like there was a continuity shift between all of them. And it was great talking to your niece about that when we had the opportunity to do it, because it was kind of cool to see it with her as a reader, not reading all of it, what that looked like and how it wasn't, you know, while there were certain parts of it that might have been a little bit jarring for her, she was able to pick up along the way and figure out what was going on because the stories were crafted enough that they worked in isolation as well. And I think that's kind of it's a tough balance. But for somebody, I was reading all of them. Wow. Just an amazing thing. And that's really all I've got to say about the Bat books. I think it was really an appropriate way to end for me, was just to really have a testament to how this felt like a line, because that's something I'm excited about with this line.
Amen. Amen. And I wish if I had any criticism, and it's not even any criticism because they're great both titles, but Batwing and Batwoman. I'm absolutely loving these titles. I'm getting great stories from them, and I'm getting a close minute a connection to them. But I am very concerned about those two titles because they're not completely and deeply interacting the way the other titles are. They're kind of separate entities, and they're kind of outside of the Bat bubble. And I can actually see people who are Bat family, Bat fans, not picking them up because there isn't a direct connection to it. There's not that close tie to Batman, that we're seeing in all the other titles, and that's something I'm a little bit concerned about for those two titles.
I liked though that they weren't forced into it, and I agree. I'm not going against what you're saying because I get your point. You're concerned that readers aren't trying those titles because they're not connected, and I agree with your point. But as a reader of both of those books who's enjoying both of those books, there's points where it wouldn't make sense to have either of those titles interacting with it. Just, because Batwoman's not a part of the family. And I liked that she wasn't forced into being a part of the family. She doesn't have that relationship with the Joker. And I think forcing her into that would have been like, why are we doing this again? Now, having faith in the creative team who writes Batwoman, I think they could have fit it in fine. But I'm glad that they didn't, because to me, I don't know that it makes sense to have done that, because there isn't the personal connection with the Joker. Same thing with Batwing. He doesn't have the personal connection with the Joker. So there was something about that I liked, that he couldn't have messed with them the way that he messed with the others because he doesn't have the history. And it would have been, I think it would have derailed what I was liking about poking holes in the Joker because he was using his history to attack them. and to make them believe he knew more than he did to the point where we still question it. And I think that would have been lost if you threw two people in there that didn't have that history. So it wouldn't have worked for the story, but yet I echo your sentiments that I get concerned about the readership of those books because they're top quality books that maybe don't sell. I don't know. I can't pretend I know the sales numbers for both of those titles, but I know Batwing's getting a creative team shift, and we're getting a Batwing shift. And that's usually done when you're trying to drum up some readership for a title. So I'm hoping that does that because I'm digging the concept a lot. And I like both of those titles. So I'm agreeing with you. But from a story standpoint, I'm also saying I'm glad that they didn't do that because it wouldn't have made sense. And I think it would have ruined what I liked about making the creative choices of bringing people in.
Oh, yeah, and I agree with what you're saying, how they don't have the connection to the Joker. And to be honest, I'm not intelligent enough to figure out how they really could have tied it in. The only thought I had in my head was if they would have handled it like they did with Teen Titans, where they're not directly dealing with the Joker, but they're there dealing with Gotham. And they're dealing with the craziness that the Joker's causing, kind of like coming in to help out Batman, he threw out the, hey, give me a hand here, and they came to running. And with Batwoman, it actually makes sense that she's not actively in the titles because she flat out turned him down to join Batman Inc. So there is, withheld within the story, they're explaining why he's not in their title, why there's not that great connection. And it's something I'm like, this is a great story, and I'm loving the character. I'm loving how they're doing it. And I even, as I'm reading the story, I appreciate that they didn't pigeonhole Bruce into the title just to say, hey, look at this. But it's always something I'm always concerned about because I've got such a connection to those titles. David over in Batwing, he's another character. I'm not just calling him Batwing. I'm calling him by his real name. These are characters. These are people that I'm like, you know what? These are good, honest, honorable people that I would want to hang out with. I'd want to be friends with. And for me, that's something that if you're not giving it a shot, give it a shot. Give these titles a read. These are both really well-written, well-drawn titles. And it comes with a high recommendation from me to just give it a shot.
Jim, let's go on to In Brightest Days. I actually like that was your title for the Green Lantern group. And why don't we go ahead? Why don't you kick us off with where you started with the whole Green Lantern titles?
You know what? I no longer hate the city of Baltimore. Now, for those of you who don't know, I've made multiple comments about hating the city of Baltimore, and I've also said I hate the city of Pittsburgh, which I no longer hate as well. Those all come from football references with the Cleveland Browns.
Jim, what about Idaho?
You know what? I'm okay with Idaho now. I think I'm getting calmer in my days. But my hatred was from them was because of the Cleveland Browns and the Baltimore Ravens and the Pittsburgh Steelers and just everything that happens there. But I can honestly and sincerely say I no longer hate the city, and I actually probably could even visit it in the future. And the whole my new enjoyment and appreciation for the city comes from Guy Gardner and his origin story and just everything about the Gardner family, this great cop family, that when I'm reading this story, I'm going, you know what? This is a cop story right here. This is what you get. Granted, you got the supernatural, the super freaky, giant intergalactic police force, but in the end, this is a cop family with all the, nuances and all the craziness that comes with putting on the badge. You're seeing this in Guy, and I have to say, I really like Guy as a character now, and I'm actually even rereading some non-New 52 stories, and I appreciate him more. And I am applying the current backstory to that other character, but it's still, there's something about Guy Gardner now that I'm enjoying reading him. I used to hate this character. I used to why are they wasting ink on this idiot? Get rid of him. Cut his finger off. Take the ring from him. Be done with it. Now I will fight and defend Guy Gardner. I would stand back to back, toe to toe with this guy, and I know he would have my back because I would have his. And that's, you see the honor, you see the character, you see just the strength of Guy Gardner now. And it's something that I am really glad that we've gotten, from this from the New 52, and especially coming through the Green Lantern Corps, everything he's gone through, all the missteps, the stumbles, then the rebirth, and just everything he's been through within these the New 52 has been just this great adventure.
It's funny how I did my Green Lantern a little bit differently because it's such an interesting line that it's really hard for me to separate the titles when I talk about Green Lantern. So this is one where I kind of picked up characters or moments that it stood out for me and what I really liked. My number 2 was Guy Gardner. And it's funny how your venom that you were spitting out before seems to be internally in Guy now because he was partially Red Lantern for some time. But one thing I really liked and why I put him number 2 is the relatability of Guy Gardner. And I don't feel like we've lost at the core what made the character so interesting for all these years. But I feel like I relate to Guy and I understand Guy. And Guy's one of those people that, like, I think if people who are intimately know Guy and know his journey, which is probably very few because of how many people he's pushed away throughout his life. But I would think the people that know him understand that underneath that brash exterior is this guy who was wounded, but who's also tried and true and will stick to his guns. And when he makes mistakes, he will step up again. He is the guy that will have your back. He will be there for you, and he will surprise you in ways that you don't on the surface realize that he's going to. I love that about the character. I think it's a journey that has been really interesting with him, and that's why it's funny. I'm like, Guy Gardner's in my number 2 spot because of his relatability now? Where in the world is this coming from? Great year for Guy Gardner. I've really enjoyed the character immensely. He's becoming one of my favorite Lanterns in a way that's just blowing me away. So that was really, really cool.
Yeah, my next point, and it's funny you're talking about becoming one of your favorite Lanterns. I've got another character that I wasn't the biggest fan of, but I'm really digging him, and I'm glad to see where they're going with him, and that's Kyle. With him turning into the White Lantern, everything that happened with him to gather his knowledge and acceptance and power over the different color spectrums was a great story. I was like, this is kind of cool. As it's going on, you're seeing a little bit more glimpses of Kyle. You're seeing a little bit more understanding of him. And when I say I wasn't the biggest fan, I didn't hate the character. I didn't dislike him. He was like, oh yeah, Kyle's cool, okay. And I never really had an emotional connection to him. Well, I'm getting that connection to him. I'm starting to really appreciate and understand why everybody's like, oh, Kyle's, whenever I would hear the Kyle love, whether it's forums, the panels, whatnot, wherever you would get it, I was like, oh, okay, yeah, I never really got it. I never understood why there was so much love for the character. Well, now I get it. Now I see that. And this is another one of those characters where I'm looking forward to what the future holds for him. Where is this going to go now that he is the White Lantern? I so want him to keep that power. I so want him to stay in all the color spectrums and not just become a Green Lantern. I want this to go somewhere else, or this is where I want him to focus on right now. And especially within that New Guardians title, I think that's a great usage of him, a great place for him, and he's an excitement for the future.
I'm going to combine my biggest surprise with my number 5 to kind of get myself a little bit back on track because I jumped to my number 2. But it fit at the time. And it fits with what you're talking about. My biggest surprise was the nice balance of focus for all of the Earth Lanterns. I really felt like this has been a terrific year where, like you mentioned with Kyle, we've gotten to see every Lantern spotlighted in ways that are really important and also distinguished as being unique, relevant, and important. When you've got that many Lanterns from Earth, you start to sit there and say, okay, what makes them different? Why do we need them? What is their role? And I felt like that's been really one of the great things in the New 52, in the series in general. But I do feel this last year in particular has done a really good job at distinguishing events that have happened to each of them that have set them apart, made them unique, and made you as a fan, what's going on with Hal? What's going on with Kyle? What's going on with Guy? What's going on with Baz? What's going on with John? And these are characters that have each had great story arcs that are in a way that are relevant. And then let's go to the Red Lanterns. We've got an Earth Lantern, an Earth Red Lantern now. You got a lot of characters from Earth who you really care about because they're unique and they fit. And Zero Issues have done a great job with that, but also arcs within each of their individual books. And even this First Lantern story arc right now, where we're seeing them spotlighted with how the First Lantern's attacking them, has been, I think, a great chance for us to connect with them in unique ways. I've really enjoyed that. That's hard to do. And it's something that I think has been very hard in Green Lantern titles throughout the years, to find ways to make all of them feel relevant at the same time. And for this last year, I think it's been a really, really good year of not losing any of those characters along the way. My number 5 is John Stewart, dealing with tough responsibilities. And things that have happened where, he had to be faced with a decision to kill another Lantern and to kill Mogo. And those were calls that, you can sit there as a fan and go, was there another way for him to handle that? I'm not sure. But I get why he did everything that he did. And, I would have trouble not speaking in his behalf in a court case, in any of those. And it's really, those are emotional struggles where you see a hero killing other heroes, for the reasons that he did, and to sit there and say, but I get why he did it. And that adds a military aspect to him, to the book, to his decision-making process at the time, going, what would have happened if he didn't do it that way? And it was something that I really enjoy, those conundrums, and I think it made his story arc unique. To seeing him with Fatale, have that kind of bonding between the two of them after everything they've been through, what, she's held him accountable for, the destruction of her world, and to see them kind of come together at the end and kind of the two of them respect everything that they've gone through, the hardships that they've gone through to reach this end point, I think has been a really great story arc. And it fit in my number 5 spot because there was a build to that. And that's going to be a common theme with all of my points about Green Lantern. It fits Guy. It fits the Earth Lanterns. None of these things are done in 1 or 2 issues. There's a build to all of these moments that I think is relevant and important. And this is what comics are all about. And I think it's really important for the higher-ups at DC, when they're putting together creative teams, to take a look at what's working in their heavy hitter books. And a lot of it is driven by the fact that there's long-term stories with a long-term relevance to it. So things that have built for years paying off. I think that's really important moving forward, to take a look at that. That's why these things are important. And you've got to be careful when you're shuffling creative teams around to, if you're saying this isn't working, that happens for whatever reason. There's things that just aren't working out, whatever. It's just not a good fit, mesh, whatever. As a fan, I can't pretend that I understand the behind the scenes of that, and I don't always agree with the choices that are made. That happens. But if you're going to make that change, you've got to take a look at, okay, we're fixing something that maybe we don't like behind the scenes as a company. If we're going to fix that, make a shuffle to put somebody in place, put a situation in place with a long-term plan. Not an arc, a long-term plan. Because that's how you build a readership onto a comic, when we as fans anticipate and years later see a payoff from that title. Months later see a payoff from that title. Constant payoffs. But payoffs that leave then something open for the future afterwards, where we're like, okay, cool, this just paid off, but where do we go from here? And what about this event that we saw 3 months ago that we haven't paid off yet? You got to build that anticipation. Green Lantern has been a title consistently, one of the best lines that DC produces, with long-term build, long-term payoff. I don't know of another line that's doing it the way that Green Lantern has consistently since Rebirth. And I think it's only built and grown. Moving forward, you're shifting creative teams. And I know there's been some turmoil in I've seen on the internet with situations there. I can't pretend to know what's going on behind the scenes. Some of the reasoning back there, I'm kind of like, whoa, what's going on? They've got to look as a company at what has worked with this line, and make sure you give creative teams a chance to build this. if you're moving forward with the Green Lantern books. You have to build this because it's been the most consistent line with that build. You need to have that moving forward. You don't want to lose fans from the Green Lantern line. I'm so willing to give this line a chance moving forward. It's got to have this, though, because to me it's one of the most important distinctions to the Green Lantern line has been this sense of build and longevity where as you're reading each month, even when they're not doing a big, huge crossover arc, but as you're reading each month, these events have tethered where the creative knew we're going here, this is how we're getting there with this character. You know, that's important. It's really where you're like, these seemed disconnected. And when they came together, every event that was happening in all these titles, from when Guy was traveling into new lands that we'd never seen before, how that tied back into stuff that Kyle was doing and Hal was doing, I would have never guessed that it was going to tie back in the way that it had, and how it was all building to everything that was going on with the Guardians. That's really important about this line and something that I think is essential. And it's one of, it's the biggest surprise, I think, for me in that line. And that balance is because of the longevity and the long build.
And one of the points I have, and it goes on about long build and the growth of the stories, has been one of the most unlikely friendships that I never thought I would see. Not only see, but actually start to really appreciate and enjoy. It's Arkillo and St. Walker. You see, when they first started having them interacting, it was St. Walker healing Arkillo. When I first read that, I'm thinking, oh, okay, they're doing it so we can have actual dialogue, not just kind of sounds from Arkillo. We'd actually get something from him. Like, oh, that's kind of a neat way of doing it. But that wasn't the reason behind it. They had a story plan. They had a story plan for these two. They had a growth between them, a friendship, and that's part of this new Guardians, title that I absolutely love is seeing these two interacting, seeing them work together. A Yellow Lantern and a Blue Lantern should not be friends, but yellow and blue make green, so who knows where we're going to go actually from these two, what's going to happen. And it also helped spotlight just the St. Walker as being this really deep man of peace. You think back to when they first told his origin story about all the turmoil he went through, all the hardship, just how much that guy went through. And the whole time he's like, don't worry, all will be well. And he kept that thing. And you're just like, really, dude? Come on, man. It's kind of tough. But it really shows, and this has helped spotlight just how he is that man of peace, how he is able to bring hope, how he is able to inspire others to do great things. And the process has also really helped give Arkillo more depth than just being this monster of fear. We're seeing the person, the creature or whatnot behind the ring with him as well. And I think that's something that I really can appreciate, and it was something I just had to bring up and I had to mention, because this was, kind of a surprise for me that I really connected these two, and that when I started thinking of all of the green titles, this is a notion that popped in my head. I'm like, you know what? That's a really cool concept. That's a really cool idea.
My number 4 was, or in English, Hal and Sinestro. It's funny how, Hal and Sinestro turned into this background story going on in Green Lantern, but how much I was really enjoying it. And really, again, the reason why is the build from Hal being ready to accept the fact that he was no longer a Lantern, and looking at that as an opportunity to move forward with Carol, to take a look at a side of life that he never had a chance to. And I like that kind of stuff, where you see these people who make these great sacrifices, and how do you transition into civilian life? This is something that we've seen in Hal's history, where Hal's not been the Lantern, and he's had to try to transition into civilian life, sometimes successfully, sometimes not successfully, sometimes because he's dead. All kinds of reasons in Hal's history that Hal would have to transition into, I don't know if when you're dead it counts as transitioning into civilian life, but it is one of those things that happens. Hal is one of those characters that I wanted to see with Carol. I was kind of into the idea of seeing a great relationship, be built. And they pulled in a great way. They pulled the rug out from under us when Sinestro came and gave him a fake ring, and all of a sudden now he's kind of become the trailer to the truck that is Sinestro. and then that build to both of them hitting this point where realizing what was going on with the Guardians and having to make this decision of, okay, how do we get involved in this? You know, Hal realizing and having a respect for this guy that he also, we talked about this with Jason Todd and Batman. Deep philosophical differences between these two characters. Yet there is a respect there in a weird way. It leads to a lot of disrespect, the differences, but it also leads to a respect between the two of them. And when you see them sitting there, there's a certain point between the two where you're like, wow, these are true nemesises in the DC universe, interacting in a way that feels classic, that feels iconic, where you've got Sinestro being the Lantern, and Hal kind of combating with him, but then realizing, whoa, this dude's onto something. He's seeing things in a way that we aren't. And maybe some of what he was thinking all along about the Guardians, at the core, was true. And what happens when you're faced with that? Because some of the criticisms that Sinestro's had about the Guardians are paying off here. So, whoa. And I loved that, where I don't feel like Sinestro's a good guy. I don't look at him that way. He's in a weird gray area where I see the bad guy side of him as well. And he's a tyrant, and all those things are true about him. Control freak and all that. But yet you see that he's three-dimensional. And that's great story development with that character. And to see him interact with Hal in this way, and to see the two of them, go and encounter Tomar Ray, and, with after Black Hand basically, ended both of them, I just thought was really, really great, terrific moments between the two of them. And I just can't wait to see where they go from here and where this storyline goes. So that was my number 4. It's funny that Hal and Sinestro wind up as my number 4, being how much I love them. But they definitely deserve a spot in the top 5 for those moments.
My number 2 moment has been the fall of the Guardians. and it's been told through multiple story arcs. It was a nice, slow build and just anticipation of the next story, anticipation of what's going to happen, to the final just massive reveal with the Third Army and just what they are capable of, from lobotomizing, one of their own to completely trashing their own core. Just because for doing what they think is the right thing. Let's eliminate all emotion. Let's do this. They've gone from being the creators of this intergalactic police force to being probably the most dangerous villains in the universe. And I loved seeing that process. I loved seeing how it played out, with especially how they played Guy Gardner. They got John out of the picture. They took care of Kyle. They took care of Hal. All of their big guns, they're moving them around, shifting them here, putting them here, manipulating the situation just to introduce this army. And when they first introduced they first started talking about the Third Army's coming, what's going to happen, I had so many different theories, and they all pretty much fell apart. And I am so glad that I was wrong, because the story I actually got was so much better than anything I could come up with, that this has been just a great run and a great fall. And it's even not done yet, but we're going to be getting to that point, with the Wrath of the First Lantern. And if we didn't have such a solid groundwork, the current story wouldn't be as exciting. The future wouldn't be as exciting. The Green Lantern titles are another one of that universe that has that universal feel for me, and I'm deeply excited for this. I'm curious where it's going to go. Part of me is a little bit worried because we have creative changes, but in the end, we have the solid groundwork. We have the solid foundation that I can see great stuff still coming out of it.
My number 3 was your number 2, the build to the fall of the Guardians. And I echo, I'm not going to say much because, to be honest with you, I agree with everything that you said. To me, and I love the idea that it was so twisted that they boxed up some of their, their own emotions, but also other Guardians from the past. And, just seeing that this is something that has been there through their history with what they've done, with choices they've made, with things like the Manhunter switching to the Core, but even going beyond before that, really showing us a side of the history of the Guardians that we did not know. And it's moving forward, seeing where, how are they going to resolve all this? Where is it going to go from here? I just think it's been a great storyline because it really feels like this is a culmination of stuff that's been building since the original history of the Green Lanterns, but really right to Rebirth straight on through. And these creative teams deserve a major pat on the back. Everyone who's worked on the Green Lantern titles through all these years, from artists to writers, and I'm going from Rebirth on, but then you got to go back and give nods to the original creators all the way through, where Johns and company have done a great job of pulling from that mythos and bringing it in. It's really a line that honors what's great about this whole concept. And I really feel like right now, this is the line of books in a unique way through this Fall of the Guardians, where we've seen such an honoring of the rich history, of the Green Lantern titles, that I just really feel has totally embraced everything that's great about the DC Comics and other worlds and the galactic cosmos and all that kinds of crazy stuff, that I want to see this translate into other media in the way that it does here. I think your animated series has done a great job of that. I think these animated one-offs have done a great job of that. I liked the movie with Ryan Reynolds a great deal. It's the director's cut in particular I'm referencing. I think that it didn't have the opportunity to go where it was. I really felt like this was a movie that, it was meant to have its sequel to really kind of go, okay, I get what they were doing with one. It makes sense now when you see two, and we're unfortunately we're not going to see that. Yeah. But I think that there's a story to be told there. But I think it's because of this just really cool, amazing mythos that's been created here. And I keep using mythos as a word, but I think that's a really important part of any comic universe is its history. Even when you reboot it, and that's happened before throughout comics where you're relaunching either a whole line or you're relaunching characters, you've got to put those elements back in a way that makes sense. This line is a great example of a line that really, I think, out of all the DC lines, has done it the best. And it has fully embraced the history of these characters, where there's been subtle changes because of the New 52, particularly with Kyle and Guy. But I think they've been changes that have embraced what worked for them before and made sense of why they would be in the places that they are now in a way that makes them still feel like the characters that we know and love, and yet has connected us with them in a way that maybe we didn't before. The Guardians is another great example where these are characters who've always felt distant, with the exception of Ganthet. They've always felt distant, and now we're seeing why. Why couldn't you connect with them? Because they shut down their own emotions. Yeah. To the point where they got so power hungry with it that they lobotomized their own guy. It's going to be very interesting to see how this turns out and how it plays out. Particularly Ganthet is somebody you're talking about the Fall of the Guardians. Ganthet in particular is somebody I want to wait to see what the end of the tunnel looks like for him.
Oh God, yeah. It's the anticipation of where it's going to go is something that I'm really looking forward to. And when I look at my number one point, and it may surprise people, it may not. It's John Stewart. When I stop and I think about Green Lantern stories I've told the people and I've talked about, the character that comes up the most for me is John. Whether it's him blowing up Mogo, snapping Kirk's neck, the aftermath, his trial, his meeting Kirk's family, both before the trial and then after the trial, or Mogo's reform. John's a character that I think, wow, this has been some amazing stuff they've done with this guy. And he keeps going on. He keeps persevering. He keeps pushing through. And when those rumors of him being killed off hit the internet, I was furious. Mm-hmm. I was like, what? You cannot get rid of this guy. What are you doing? I was ready to shoot off the most venom-filled rage that I put on the red ring. I was full-on rage, just anger. And, I was all set to start firing off hate mail and just, various negative commentary. And I'm kind of glad that...
Jim, I actually have my when you started that, I put on my plastic blue ring. And just so you know, it's on right now. All will be well. I actually do have it on.
I'm calm because
Okay.
there was all a giant rumor. He's not dying, so I'm very happy.
Just so you know, next to it though, I put on the orange one because I don't know. I'm sure there's something I'm going to want that's going to be mine in a matter of minutes. Isn't that kind of like what you do as a comic fan? You're going to gather stuff.
I usually will have all the rings on at one point in time,
Right.
but I like to wear blue and green on one hand, blue on the other, because I want to I want to have the green ring, but I want to have that little extra kick to it, so I don't have to worry about power levels.
Oh, that's a good way to look at it.
But it's what's going on with John though. This is a character though that. When the Larfleeze comic comes out, I'm going to pick it up and I will enjoy it. I'm confident in the creative team, but I personally would have rather them do another Green book and have John be the main character because I think he can support the character. I think he can support a solo title. Heck, make him the main character for the Green Lantern title. I wouldn't have an issue with that. That's how much I really care about this character and I appreciate him. His usage has been wonderful, but they could always do more John Stewart in my book.
Yeah, I agree with your love for the character. My number one is probably going to shock you. It's Baz. Baz was like one of the biggest surprises for me through his development. It's funny how I'm like, do we really need another Lantern? Do I want him to be long-term, short-term? He's a character who I think they've just done a great job of crafting, where I love that he's a character who, through circumstance, was on the wrong side of the tracks, through his own choices was on the wrong side of the tracks, and feels guilt and remorse for it, and is striving to try and do the right thing. His whole relationship with Badge, I think, has been stellar. Seeing him try to seek out, Hal, and sorting out the differences between Hal and Sinestro based on his interactions with others, and using that information to make judgments when he meets the two of them. And really kind of taking that into account with who he listens to, I thought was really pivotal moments, and I think it's great character development. I've been digging Baz, and it's funny I'm a Hal guy. That's my favorite Lantern is Hal. And it goes back to just my childhood of growing up knowing Hal. And to have Baz be the guy where I'm like, whoa, this is my number one for since his introduction, I think he's been a character that's slowly grown into a character that I love over time. I like that he doesn't feel like any of the others. Because if you're going to introduce a new guy, you don't want him to feel like a generic anybody else. And he doesn't. He's fleshed out. He's different. He's unique. I love his reasoning for carrying the gun, for example, which isn't something I'm normally a fan of with superheroes. But I get his point, especially with the fact that he's gone without having power in the ring. And not knowing the training and have been through what the other ones have, I think is something that really fits the character. So it's cool. I don't mind if he drops it down the road. But for right now, it makes sense that he would have it. He would be a little different. I like his inclusion on the Justice League of America. I think he's just a character that I'm glad to see going forward is going to have a bigger role. And he's my number one. I've really enjoyed the character.
I had two surprises, and one of them was Baz. That it was, I was curious when they announced the new introduction of a new Lantern, and I'm very surprised at how quickly I've really been connected to this character and how quickly I'm willing to protect and defend him as a Lantern and say, yeah, he should be a Green Lantern. He's got the right character behind it. We've seen him step up when needed, and I'm really digging this character, and I'm very happy that he's around, and I was echoing a lot of your sentiments as you were talking. I was just nodding my head saying, yes, this is a great character, and this is another one of those characters. I want to see a long-term, contract with him in the Green Lantern Corps, him with the titles, definitely him in Justice League of America. That's going to be some really cool stuff. And I was very, very happy and excited with where he's going and what the future holds for him. And as I said, I had two surprises, Baz being one. My second surprise was the fact that I didn't list Hal Jordan on my listing at all. When I look at this and I start thinking of the Green Lantern universe, those were some cool stories. I'm not knocking anything on that, but for me, I think I'm becoming less and less of a Hal Jordan guy. I'm starting to appreciate more of the core. I'm appreciating more of the strength of the core of all these different characters. I listed Guy Gardner, who is literally a character I absolutely had venom for. Now he was in my top 5. I had to, I got to talk about Guy. He's a great person. John Stewart was my number 1 Green Lantern. Right there, it kind of surprised me because I never really had a connection and a love for all the other characters, but I was like, yeah, Hal's the guy, Hal's the man. You know what? The core doesn't necessarily, in my mind, the core does not need Hal Jordan. The core will be just fine without him. Now, granted, Hal is a cool character, and coming the future, I know we're going to get some neat stories out of him. Especially eventually, he'll get his ring back, and I'll be probably singing a completely different tune, like, "Oh, thank God they got Hal back." But as I've looked over the past year, they've really done a great job showing us the strength of these other characters. And I think that is, my real deep appreciation for the creative team, what they've done with this. As I said, they built this solid foundation, and it's one of the areas where I really see it.
Jim, for my disappointment, and I didn't really have anything. There's nothing I'm disappointed about in the Green Lantern line. I just wanted to note, though, when I was looking at that, I'm kind of like, well, I'm not just including the Green Lantern books in that. I'm including books like Red Lanterns and Thresholds into that as titles that I'm Threshold, I should say, as titles that really have continued to expand the Green Lantern universe, and I've really enjoyed them. And I'm with you as far as books like Larfleeze being added to the mix. Creative team on there has me really excited. He's a character I want to see more of. I'm kind of looking at that the same way that I looked at Red Lanterns, where I'm just kind of excited to see what they're going to do exploring another color core. I'm still of the mind that I would love to see an anthology title of the other core, but I'm kind of cautious of that because a lot of times we get a lot of development of those other core through their interaction with the Green Lanterns. And I think sometimes the Green Lantern universe is better served by having the interactivity between these core. Like Red Lanterns does really well when it plays off of the events that are going on in the Green Lantern books. So I don't know that we necessarily need to have every core launched off into its own title or an anthology, as long as we're in an anthology kind of manner, bringing back the core in ways that you can tell more stories with them in their other books. And with everything that was going on in books like New Guardians, where you had all the other cores present in there, I think there's just some really good storytelling opportunities with them. So I don't know. I could go either way on that. I would gladly read an anthology of the other core, but I think there's a point to that. I think it's just a great line. I think it's one of the best produced lines that DC's putting out right now. And creatively, the shift that's going on is really pivotal with this line. You need to put creators in there that, have a direction planned for it, have a long-term direction for these characters, because that's the kind of storytelling we're used to. This is space opera. It should feel epic. It should feel big. It's got to feel different than the other titles. That's one of the great things I think that has worked with the Green Lantern books. It feels like those old serials that I used to love with Flash Gordon and stuff like that. You wanted to come back every week to see what happens with Flash and Ming and all those characters because of the fact that it was a big ongoing story. There was a continuation to something that was happening. There was a build to something. And I think there's a point at looking back at what worked with stuff like that, what brought people to theaters with things like that I think has worked so well in modern day, reimagining and advancing that in the Green Lantern comics. I think these creators that have been working on this title understand great space opera and how to do that. And that's something moving forward. You need to have those kind of creators involved. And you need to have that kind of direction moving forward. I'm scared and excited for the future of the Green Lantern books. I think there's always something interesting when you got new creators with new excitement coming on board. I'm scared that, do they have the right ones? Do they have the ones with the direction? Does their ideas match enough with editorial that there's going to be a good energy there? Because that's really important. You need everybody kind of on the same page with the same direction, open to those ideas being shared, because this is a big idea universe, the Green Lanterns. concept universe. When you get those ideas in there, it's really clear that each of these creators have contributed really cool ideas to what has happened here. And I think you need that moving forward, so I'm hoping that winds up in place. So I have a lot of tentative excitement for this. Some worry as well with you talking about, like, you know, that the decision, like, you know, to kill off Jon Stewart. What? It's, you know, I feel kind of the same way that I did when I first heard about with Damien. I don't know that this fits the same bill, because I'm with you. I don't know that character, I don't see what purpose that would serve. So I don't know. Let's see where that's going to go. So great year for Green Lantern. I want to see moving forward that same kind of energy. I'm willing to give anything a chance because I think these are great characters and a great title. And I think it's interesting when you see creators leaving this way by their own choice. I think it makes it much easier as fans to kind of embrace trying something new. I don't know if it does for you. It does for me, where I feel like, wow, they got a really cool chance to put down their exclamation point on this. They're all choosing as a group to say, you know what, we did our thing here. Let's move on. And there's something to that works for me, that the shift is happening this way. At least I'm hoping that's the way that it's playing out behind the scenes, that they're choosing to do this as a group, because it looks like that's the way it is. And I feel like they've given us a lot of tremendous story, and I thank them for that.
Hope this craft can withstand this powerful force.
Hi, this is Peter from Nebraska City, Nebraska. Tigger Pete on Twitter. I just wanted to call because I just got caught up with you guys from the archives. I started listening at episode number 1 like a little over a year ago. So yeah, it's taken a while. But I just thought I'd like to call about a couple of comics I just read. And for the most part, I want to say Earth 2 is probably one of my favorite comics going right now because I just read issue number 9, and that is pretty much my definition of fun in a comic book because there's all kinds of stuff happening. It's just fun the whole time. Also, I'm a huge Green Arrow fan, and while I haven't really been watching Arrow, it's mostly because I'm waiting for the season so I can get the DVDs and watch it all at once because I have a job where I can't really see stuff when it happens all the time. But when it comes to the comics, I've been reading Green Arrow this whole time, but it's just never been clicking with me until the recent creative team change. And I gotta say that I'm really looking forward to what Jeff Lemire has to do with this book, because I wasn't a huge fan of Ann Nocenti, but I have liked issue 17 so far for Jeff Lemire. As for JLA and stuff like that, I haven't really gotten my comics yet, so I would really like to read that. So I'm really looking forward to that series. So I'm going to keep it somewhat brief, and just thought I'd like to tell you guys that I enjoyed the show, and you guys have been doing pretty well. So keep up the good work. Thank you. Bye.
I love Earth 2. And so Peter, I'm really glad that you called about Earth 2 because it's one of those books that's really special to me. And actually something we're going to be talking about on our next episode as we continue this Raging Oscars. So it's one of those series that I agree with you. There's a fun factor to it. And it brings back the multiverse. And the multiverse is something that's important to me. There's more than one Earth. And it's something that this sets up. And it's giving a chance for a rich exploration of another Earth. Something that hasn't been done in a while on this level. And I think that's something that's always been unique about these characters, has been the chance to really explore that. It's a rich history in DC, having this Earth be one that they really richly develop and explore. And I'm glad James Robinson's having an opportunity to do that because it's something that's great. And I hope that it garners a fan base that will continue to follow it, and we'll get to see this for many years to come. Because the great part is with setting up a legacy system like they're doing with that world, is that we've got a chance to really not only get some great stories with these characters now, but also to gradually learn more and more of the backstory of this world, which I'm highly interested in. So I'm with you. I think it's just a great book, and thanks for calling with your thoughts on books, and please feel free to call again. I really love when people call up and just geek out over something that they're really enjoying. And I'd love to hear what you think about JLA now that the book is launched and you have a chance to read it.
Holy caffeine!
James, our next episode is going to be the Raging Oscars Part 2. And sponsoring us this episode is dcbservice.com and instocktrades.com. Over at dcbservice.com, this is the time of the month where they're going to be putting up all the new books, all the new bundles that they're doing. They're doing a lot of this bundling by different companies and different lines, and I really like when they do that. It's a great way if you like to order certain books together. You can save extra money, but it's also an easier, quicker way to order. They're also a digital partner, which means if you're doing any of your digital ordering right from their website, make sure to link your account to your DCB service account. Earn 5% of those purchases you're already making towards your DCB service order. So make sure to check out those websites right now and see what's coming new. Over at InStockTrades.com, we shouted out at the beginning, The American Vampire Volume 5 hardcover. It's regularly $29.99, 50% off only $14.99. That's a close to 300-page book at only $15. And if you're not reading any of the Vertigo material in hardcover format, this is really a beautiful way. You know, Jim and I talk about stockpiling. I like to read a lot of titles. Walking Dead is a great example of a title, and I know, Jim, you're reading it this way. Walking Dead is a great example of a title that I really enjoy. A lot of times I have to read Walking Dead collected because, you know, time-wise, I'm reading so many monthly books. I've really enjoyed getting these hardcover collections of Walking Dead, which are also available on InStockTrades.com. Certain titles I just now enjoy reading in hardcover collected format. And a lot of my Vertigo stuff winds up that way. Things like Walking Dead wind up that way. And I just really enjoy the beauty of these hardcovers. I enjoy the feel of them. And it just seems to be, just the paper quality is really nice. It's just a wonderful experience. I know you're reading Walking Dead that way, and you really enjoy that experience, don't you?
Oh, God, yeah. Oh, yeah.
So I want to really shout out InStockTrades.com for just being your hardcover and softcover source. Remember, orders of $50 or more give you free shipping. So I want to thank both of those websites for the last 7 years for really just being there for us and supporting our show and many other podcasts that they do. And Jim, actually, as we go to close out, this is our first episode. It's after the 23rd, which is our actual show anniversary. It's our end of the month episode where we get a chance to really thank everybody for supporting Raging Bullets. This has been 7 years of podcasting for us. It's a big deal. This was a show that really, when you and I originally started doing this, we thought this was going to be a couple month venture of really just kind of exploring what it would take to take a non-reader and bring them into comics. It was an experiment that we had no idea when we first did our first recording that it was going to turn into this. But I want to take this time to thank everybody who's been a part of our listening audience, anybody who's ever been a guest on the show, anybody who behind the scenes, there's a lot of quiet listeners where maybe you just listen to podcasts and behind the scenes, maybe you shouted us out a blog or a website or whatever, and we've had no interaction with you, but you've been here casually or you listen all the time, whatever capacity you've been a part of our show. We really appreciate you because as a podcaster, to keep coming back every week doing what we do, it's a big undertaking. This is a fan undertaking. We don't make money off of this. We're lucky enough to have sponsors that pay for our costs of doing the podcast. But this isn't a money-making operation. It's a labor of love. And what keeps us coming back is the support we get from you. That's not something that's trite to say. It means a lot. Jim, working with you as a co-host during this time, I couldn't do this podcast if I wasn't doing it with you. The fun of working off of you, my genuine respect of the fact that you're a different kind of reader than I am. I look forward to recording with you because you come with honest, open opinions that come from the unique person that you are. So I'm always interested in, I know we razz each other on the show all the time when we have difference of opinions, but it would not be a fun program for me to record if we were cookie cutter and the same. Half the fun for me is when I go, how in the heck does he see it that way? And then you turn out to be right. And I love that kind of stuff because I think that really makes for just a fun recording. I can't believe we've been doing this for 7 years, and the reason why is it's gone so fast for me because it's been a fun ride working with you. So I want to thank you. I want to thank all of our listening audience, anybody who's been a part of the show in any capacity, for just making this a great 7 years for me, and I can't wait for more.
Oh, God, yeah. I sit back and I think that I've been doing this for 7 years. Has been just an amazing concept and just notion in my head because it doesn't feel like 7 years. This is the longest commitment I have ever had in my life. And it's been just an absolute joy. And there's been times when we've had some stressful moments where we're like, I gotta get this done, and I've referred to my comic book reading as doing my homework, because I'm like, we're recording tomorrow and I haven't read the titles. Oh no. And I jump on it, but as we sit down, as we start talking, everything completely changes, and it becomes just this hanging out with my good friend and just talking about stuff that I love. And I could not imagine where my life would be if I didn't have this podcast, because y'all have no idea how much how much this has helped me, and how much this has been just personally been kind of like a savior to me, and a lot of the various inner demons I've had to deal with, that this show has got me through, and friendships, and just I don't get to see and talk to everybody as much as I wish I could, but I know I have the friends out there who, if I needed to talk to, if I needed it, they would have my back and I would have theirs. And it's been just a great experience. So thank you all very much for everything that you've done for us.
Speaking of our fan community, I want to shout out RagingBullets.com, which is the place when you want to find out what's going on with the show. Make sure to go to our show website. I want to shout out our show voicemail line. It's 1-440-388-4434, or Dr. Norge on Skype. It's a great way, as we're doing these Raging Oscar episodes, if you have your own thoughts on things that maybe like, Sean and Jim, you missed this, or you missed this point about this line, or there's a title that I wish you guys had shown more interest in that I really loved. I look at these discussions either here on the Facebook group, anywhere, as hopefully a starting point for you to shout out the things that you know and love. It's not about who's right or who's wrong. I'm right for me. Jim's right for him. Tell us what's right for you. Get those words out there, because I meant what I said on this episode, and I'm going to continue this discussion as we go into part 2. Part of the thing right now, we look at sales numbers for comics. I think the top-selling comic right now, those sales numbers are disgusting for the quality that's out there. I want this medium to be around 30 years from now. One of the themes from this show, it's not about patting things on the back that we aren't really enjoying. It's not about being fake or anything like that. As a fan, when we pick topics for the show, we go off the things that we most want to talk about, that are most interesting to us, because I really feel that the comic medium needs that. It needs people who are excited. It needs people who aren't afraid to be fans. This is the medium that spawned the term fanboys, and we need to be okay with being that. And, we don't have to tear comics apart to make them relevant. They're already relevant. We as fans need to do what we can to be ambassadors to show people why they are cool, because the numbers don't match the amount of people that I believe could be reading comics. And I think it's one of the themes of doing these Raging Oscars episodes. We try to every year change it up a little bit to fit kind of where we're at thinking-wise, so it leads to a cohesive episode that has a theme. And I hope this comes across that way to you, because I really feel like for Jim and myself, doing this one this way fit this year and kind of fit where we're at. Is it going to look like this next year? I have no idea. It's on a year-by-year basis. Every time we do these Raging Oscars, we really kind of take a look at theme-wise where we're at now and let that drive how these episodes work. And I hope that has come across in all of them. I think we've gotten better at doing that as the show has progressed. I think hopefully we'll continue to get better at that as we continue to do them further. But I really liked this theme, and hopefully you'll enjoy part 2, where we will continue on with the rest of the line. So we will see you next week for that.
Bye.
Flying through space and time, 1,000 different lifetimes. Faded for love and loss and incredibly clear sightlines. Swinging your mace around, such a practical outlook. Helping the JSA and occasionally supporting your own book. Hawkman, Hawkman. Eagle eyes can't see. Hawkman, your plan. And what you do to me. Are closing in, be they Thanin guard or Egyptian, working so hard to thwart you and Hawkgirl's mission. The odds are not on your side, and danger seems to stack up. Things would be so much easier if you would just call for backup. Hawkman, Hawkman, eagle eyes can't see your plan and what you do to me. Hawkman, Hawkman, eagle eyes can't see.